Hello and welcome back to ClapperCast. I'm your host as always, Carson Timar, and today I'm joined by Mr. Editor-in-Chief Jak-Luke Sharp as we begin our Hot Bond Summer series with a review of Thunderball. Yes, this summer we will be spending time with the 007 franchise, and today we are definitely starting with an interesting point in the franchise, really transitioning between the classic and sexy Bond of the original few films and transitioning into more of a campy tone. This is a great conversation, not just about Thunderball, but about the evolution of the Bond franchise in general. About once a month, we're going to have one of these episodes as we jump through the history of James Bond and the different actors who play him, with today being focused on the legendary Sean Connery. I cannot wait for you to hear this episode. It's definitely a long episode, definitely maybe a little bit rambly here at the end, but I still think it's very fun. Thank you so much for listening, watching, and supporting the podcast. Now let's start our Hot Bond Summer with Thunderball. Okay, hi Jack, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us at our start of our Hot Bond Summer. I will quickly say Chris Santon, friend of the podcast, was supposed to be here. Sadly, could not make it very last minute, so sad. Shout out Chris. I know he watched his film and everything and was excited to be here. But Jack, that does not mean we're not going to have a great start to, again, Hot Bond Summer. But I'm so excited because today we're talking about Thunderball, the last appearance from Terrence Young in this franchise, his third film with a character, one of the last Sean Connerys. Unfortunately, we're not going to have time to talk about every single actor and every single director of the summer, but kind of cherry picking them and starting with Thunderball. I guess you're British, you're the Brit here, so this is more your thing than my thing, I would want to say, culturally. I would love if you would start us off. Just what is your history with James Bond? I assume you've seen most of these. I assume you like some of these. And then what are your thoughts on Thunderball?
So I'm a major James Bond fan. Like I feel like I'm the stan. Like if there's Marvel stans out there, like I feel like if I went to a quiz, I could do rather well under the bracket of James Bond. My era is going to come a little bit further down our pecking order, like you said. I think we're going to get into the late 90s, and that's where I remember having them all on video in these like very special brown, not brown, but orange and black like collector's editions, special editions from MGM, and I remember having most of Brosnan, a few Roger Moore, and then a few Sean Connery. But throughout the ages, I've got a lot of love and affection for quite a lot of iterations of this character. I quite like a lot of bits and pieces of quite a few of them. But my main sort of favourite one, although I do like Timothy Dalton to really, I think he's probably the best Bond on page considering the book. Connery's the most stylish, accessible, immersive, engaging, terrific title character as James Bond, effortlessly done. But Thunderball, weirdly enough, is not one I would have watched when I was a kid. I always watched Goldfinger, and I would always watch Diamonds Are Forever. Two varying different sides of the spectrum for things, but I always found that Connery's early work, because when you were a kid, they were too slow, considering that you'd watch either A License to Kill when you were a kid, probably watch that, it's probably too heavy, but I think watching a lot of like GoldenEye, The World Is Not Enough, stuff like that, there is a lot more fast pace, and then you get into the Daniel Craig stuff. But when you get a little bit older, and I was like 15, 16, I remember they all came out and they were done on DVD a little bit, then they were all redone on Blu-ray. I remember watching Goldfinger on Blu-ray when like Blu-ray was in its pomp, like 2011, 2012, when they were remastered, and you could see the tan line of makeup above Sean Connery's collar in Goldfinger. I was like, oh my god, these are amazing. I need to go watch a few bits and pieces more. And there's loads of this stuff you can see wires, and all the old ones have sort of like this beautiness to it. But I always remember this is the one which, in retrospect, I adore the most, which is quite strange because I have a personal connection with Goldfinger. I'm not going to say it on here because it's just not really relevant. But I have like a personal connection with that film, and I adore Goldfinger, and for a multitude of different reasons. But there's also a personal connection to it, so I always hold that in the most highest of esteem on a personal. I do like From Russia with Love, and I like Dr. No. We'll talk about what comes after this a little bit, and I like Diamonds Forever to a certain degree. But this, to me, is the right niche between what came before and what comes after. I think it's exactly at the pinpoint of where Bond turned into something a little bit different. And it reminds me of something like Mission Impossible or even the Fast and Furious from also. And I know that's a fucking reach there, gang. So people listening there, I don't want to offend anyone, but listen to me. There's like a point in the Fast and Furious movies where it changes the tone a little bit and it goes to a different type of genre, if you will. And I feel like this is Fast Five. This is for the stands out there, the law. Fast Five is the fifth film, not in chronological order. Anyone out there? But I find that this is like appropriately compared to that in a sense of it has the framework and then realizes that they can do something a little bit different with it. And I think it's a perfect combination of like a little bit of Goldfinger and a little bit of what comes after with Roger Moore, but it still understands the expanse of its world. The fashion's glorious in it. The Bahamas looks amazing in it. I really like the narrative. It spends ages building up when you're with Spectre, like that. I like it when you go to the rooms. I like it that you get to see a little bit more of the 00 program. Interesting tidbit there. There's actually a woman agent that no one ever mentions. It was done in 1965, years before Latasha Lynch, although she seems to have got most of the beast of the media on her back for that. There's just interesting things of Thunderball, but most importantly, I think it looks gorgeous. I think on Blu-ray, I think the some of the photorealism where like the speed back and the projection on stuff. Yeah, it's the 1960s. It looks terrible, but there's other bits where they're in the beach of the Bahamas. I think it looks amazing. But I always really like spending time in this film. I like Connery in here. I like his fashion, his sunglasses, and all sorts of stuff. But most importantly, like I just think it's interesting that you get to spend time with the villain. I feel like there's very rare in the modern day stuff that you get to spend a great deal of more time with the actors and the performers, and you get to see a little bit of their plan as well. I just thought it was a really well balanced thing, and I know that I can't remember if it's Kevin Conroy. I think it's Kevin Conroy. I know there's a dispute here about who actually owns the trademark for Thunderball, because Danjak or Eon, they don't actually own the rights to this, and therefore they don't technically own the rights to Spectre, because then Kevin Kilroy, I think that's Conroy, sorry, remakes This Is Never Say Never Again with Connor in '83. It's strange, but Spectre's also retained till 2015 when Eon bought them out, his estate. So it actually holds a lot of place card within the franchise as well. But I'll throw it back to you. But this is one that came for me in age, but I'll always watch this one. I always like watching it on the big screen in 4K on the Apple TV stream. I think it looks amazing. I'd love to have seen this in the cinema when they did the retrospect a few years ago for its anniversary, its 60th anniversary. I mean, it looks absolutely gorgeous with its blues. But I'll throw it to you as a James Bond stan.
No. I definitely can't take the title of that. I mean, I like James Bond. I obviously saw the Craig films when they were releasing, and then before No Time to Die's original release date in 2020, like pandemics hitting, I just went ahead and I was like, I want to watch all these, because if No Time to Die is going to be this giant wrap up of what this franchise has been, at least, with some callbacks to other ones, I might as well just watch everything to understand it. A series that's really interesting in a short amount of time to go throughout the entire history of it, because it is such a evolving franchise. I mean, in some ways, I guess it's similar to, like, I watched all the Godzilla films, and you get these eras where it changes genre, it changes style, absolutely. And this is the first real sign of the campiness that is going to take over the series with the Moore films, especially. That's where it really, I think, and I enjoy the campiness of the series. I think actually the series is one I enjoy the most when it's trying to go campy rather than being overly serious or overly seductive, at least in the original. Before we get to Craig, I think Craig walks the line a little bit better when it comes to seriousness. But I was not a huge fan of Thunderball. I think the first time, again, because when you go to start to bottom, as you mentioned, this is like a film that is so chaotic, and it brings so much of that campiness to light, where if you're just watching this again from Dr. No on, it is a very jarring film to try to experience for the first time. You start out almost immediately with this hover pack. You get extended underwater sequences. The gadgets are sillier than ever. which, by the way, all those are apparently like legit. This is a real hover pack, I guess they were using. The sharks are real. Almost got bit by a shark. Like, it's all fascinating production if you read into this, to be like, we're going silly, but we're going to make it so real, while also making it like campy and dated and aged, but in a way that I find charming. I don't like when it's the projections and stuff. I don't mind that it looks bad. For me, that's like part of the charm for sure. For me, I would say, still to this day, rewatching the film, and I was excited to rewatch it, and I'm excited to rewatch selected pieces of this franchise outside of my initial viewing, because again, it was all so back to back. I think this film has really fun moments. I think there are selective scenes here that really, really work for me. I think once you get towards the middle and end, it stays pretty consistently fun and strong. For me, that pacing though at the beginning, it does take a while to get going. Definitely, I would say that is a difficult one to get through at times. And I do think just overall, there's still something about this film that is holding me back from saying I really like fully got lost in it and appreciated it. But I think maybe some of that's also the plot. It is, for a film that is so campy, it is a pretty standard plot of like, they stole the nukes and now they have to find the crashed airplane. It's stylized, definitely. I mean, I agree with you. The colors are great. The visuals are great. The underwater sequences, to this day, still feel stunning because it's real underwater photography that you would never see anymore. And at the time was absolutely revolutionary. But I don't know if the plot here was quite enough to have me as sucked in as I would say some of the other even Connery films, much less some of the others from the franchise, the highlights.
It's interesting because, like I said, I really like Bond, and I get a bit too much into it at certain points. Like I quite like the fashion in it, which again, Bond's not typically like a fashion type of icon, but I think as a man, I think there's very few films you can watch and find something like not necessarily accessible, because it's not necessarily affordable either. But I always find it that there's it's like I wouldn't go to a Marvel movie and be like, my God, that jacket, Robert Downey Jr. That doesn't do it for me. But with Bond, I always find there's something quite like ludicrously like immersive in the fact that stuff he wears, like he's effortless in how he walks, like a leopard almost. Like he looks like Connery looks like he could walk on water at points. Like the white smoke jacket with the red thing in Diamonds Are Forever. Like him in his outfit in the Bahamas, or even Dr. No with what he wears. And in Goldfinger as well, he wears like a towel polo shirt. Just like really crazy stuff, but really cool stuff for the 60s. But I feel like I also follow like James Bond lifestyle stuff. God, it's gonna sound sad. But I find like, but I find it really engaging. Like he wears a lot of stuff. When I'm gonna fucking go on here, but I'm gonna try to be precise here. When Skyfall came out, it was like, oh my God, like I'm at the age now where I can like James Bond's like, I can get stuff like this James Bond. Like I can get stuff to fit me. I was on like 16, 2012, but even then, like since like 2015 and No Time to Die, and I've got like a few things that James Bond wears, like stuff that's like affordable, accessible. It's quite difficult. Like I'm not going to go and buy some Barton Pereira sunglasses, £600, or like church boots for like £1,000. Stuff like that gets a bit crazy, and like, but I remember when I got married a few years ago, I wore a pinstripe suit because I liked the one that he wore in Quantum of Solace. I like that pinstripe suit he wears at the beginning. I like the one that he wears at the end. Which the one he wears in the beginning is Tom Ford in Quantum, but it's something else in Casino Royale. But I feel like with Bond in the early works, right, there's two separate audiences. There's the lifestyle, and then there's the action type of person. And I think a lot of Bond in the early stuff is now primarily maintained by a lifestyle type of viewpoint, which might be controversial to say, because that's not to say they're inaccessible and they're not less engaging than the others, but action is not a predominantly big first 4 point in those films. It's narrative, it's character. It's we walk with Bond somewhere, we talk, we walk somewhere, we talk. And there's nothing wrong with that, because like there's a really sort of, again, like an engagement to it, but there's a really pull with Connery just talking, like the Scottish accent with a slight lisp. There's something like he's not an atypical type of spy, but he looks trendy, always looks good. There's just something very engaging about it. I think as time goes on, the action starts to get incorporated into it, and then it balances it and it becomes what it is now. But I remember that when Casino Royale came out, it was the first type of film, and then Skyfall, the two that are the most successful, I think, in Bond's era. And you can even say No Time to Die to a certain extent is because they get the mythos of Bond a little bit more. We explore Bond. We go on holiday with him for 35 minutes in No Time to Die. In Casino Royale, we just spend time with him going around places here and there. We get to see his apartment in Skyfall. We get to see his childhood home. But it's not just that, it's that we get to spend time with him outside the, like the one thing that, I know I'm going on here, but this is going to make sense. When you look at Skyfall and you look at Spectre and you compare it to Thunderball, Skyfall and Spectre are totally different because Skyfall wants to spend time with James Bond. He wants to spend time where he's from, spend time, he soaks up the atmosphere. We get to spend time in his day-to-day things. Spectre is the antithesis of that, and the only time we spend with Bond in those occasions is that it's got to matter to the plot. He's got to be in the beginning of the film because there's going to be a massive explosion at the end. Like it's got to lead up to like a set piece. Whereas Casino Royale and Skyfall get the mythos of the early Connery works, where the opening 45 minutes to Thunderball is just plot. I mean, he's there going to a spa for injuries he sustained, arguably in Goldfinger, or the opening with the jetpack. And it's just that, like he seduces, I'll put that in quote unquote, seduces one of the workers there. But we get to spend time with him, and he noticed something. And then we go back, he's late to the meeting, classic Connery Bond. We get to see it all there. He has his meeting with them. There's like a feeling like then we go to the Bahamas and we spend loads of time there. I feel like it really does flesh out this world and this attribute of spending time and sort of a lifestyle attribute to it. I think that's the biggest thing about the early Connery works is that I think if you don't sort of vibe to it, I think you more so engage with the latter works, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I don't think Connery's Bond ever went to the action. I think you could argue that Diamonds Forever did, but I think the Connery's works just get bigger, but they don't actually have anything to say, if that makes any sense. And I think after this, You Only Live Once, or You Only Live Twice, sorry, to me is just a film that's just big, but bland. And Diamonds Forever, you could arguably say, is eerily similar. Whereas if you look at the one in between that, I know we're jumping all over the place with Lazenby, I won't talk too much, but that's the perfect combination between lifestyle and Bond, explosion and expression. That's where he gets it, where Hunt gets it, the director. I think his name's Peter R. Hunt, I think that's his name, who was the editor for the previous films. Gets it. Thunderball, I think, is the last little bit hurrah there. But I found, like, with Largo, just a classic 5'4" Italian, white hair, eye patch, golden olive skin tan, cigarette in the mouth, does not give a flying fuck about anything. Perfect Bond villain. Not interested. I work for Spectre. I'm keeping this woman who may or may not be a relation. Again, another strange attribute to 60s cinema. Who's on a boat in the Bahamas, who's working with nuclear weapons. Cool as. It's really cool stuff. Simplistic. Just very, very silly, very simple. Goes diving himself in the scuba things. Smoke on the, when they're shooting. I seem to know a lot about guns, Mr. Bond. A lot more about women. Very just simplistic stuff like that. Like, just really, again, there seems to be a sentiment with Bond throughout the years where you have to have, like, facial, what's the word? Like, distressed facial marks and stuff like that. You have to, like, have iconography of the villain to be scary. I think it's an iconography issue that happened with horror a lot, where people were like, just present the most horrifying thing visually. But, sometimes life is more horrifying than stuff like that. And I think the idea that horror's turned into, like, thematics and like Jordan Peele, and it becomes into, like, social economic things and social commentary, that's fucking scary because it's an attribute that happens now. Bond's sort of never really fallen that department. There's a little bit here and there within Casino Royale, a little bit here and there in Roger Moore, but primarily in the early Connery works due to the Cold War, like From Russia With Love and Dr. No. there's a lot there about that colonialism. Um, Again, I get from Russia with like predominantly a social commentary on the Cold War. Goldfinger to a certain extent about capitalism, and then Thunderball's an interesting one as well because I think it sort of gets away from that a little bit. But again, it's a lot to go on there. But I think is it Claude? I can't remember if it's Claudia or Claudine Ogner, Claudine or Auger, the who plays Domino. Gorgeous. I think Bond girls throughout from Ursula Andrews to Halle Berry to Monica Bellucci, Naomi Harris, gorgeous throughout. Like every single Bond girl is just like tremendous. And the thing about these, they always dub the actors and actresses as well. But I always found this to be I get a gorgeous film. I think Terrence Young is lost after this as well. I think there's a beauty here, a serene ability to catch the Bahamas, catch the turmoil. I think there's an interesting discrepancy between something looking so beautiful and yet the narrative of hiding a nuclear warhead. There's an interesting parallel there that the film never really wants to talk about. I don't think it's not really interested either. But yeah, I'll throw it back to you. But there's a lot here a lot that I like.
Yeah, and I think I get a lot of that. I think speaking about Sean Connery's kind of like time overall, I would say probably underrated in terms of the conversation around like vibes films specifically. Like these really are vibe movies for a lot of time. There's a lot of health clinics. This is not the only health clinic where you just see him go half naked most of the time, just kind of flirting with women. It's pretty intoxicating. Like there's something about, and I think it's just rather than necessarily even something about the filmmaking attached, there is something very nostalgic almost about, and like even though I've never obviously lived in the 1960s and gone to a health clinic in like Sweden and hit on women there and somewhat force them into sexual encounters. Never lived that life, but there is something like even just like the persona and the sense of masculinity. It does feel something nostalgic wise, and I think Sean Connery probably out of all of them, and I will talk. I mean, I think the next one is a probably good argument as far as like rivaling it, but his display of masculinity specifically is like pretty intoxicating. I would say it is something that does land very much so in like a very like atmospheric, charming, clean way. I see why someone would, James Bond max themselves like you are with your outfits. It connects well. I do think I would not be shocked if these movies had to come back with their portrayals of masculinity and how the conversations of masculinity are in the world today. I agree with all that. I think probably one of the biggest things when you watch this film is you really have to turn your mind off, not just of the modern Bond, but of what modern action looks like and what modern style is. There's something about this film, and I initially took it as a negative, though I have to say, like, I think it's a negative when you come in with the expectation of this is an action film rather than just viewing it in a vacuum more, where everything moves so slow. And I mean that, yes, like there are pieces of plot that are very slow, but when you think about a scene where it's like, okay, you have 2 days to find these nuclear bombs, right? Typically your response would be very quick. It would be very rapid. Oh, the clock is ticking.
Yes.
But instead you do get a lot of Bond just sitting here, at dinner in the Bahamas or flirting with this girl. And yes, there's getting information from it. But he's playing, poker. He's playing in the casino with the villain right there. And there's this like back and forth where neither one is jumping or making a move right away, but you just sit with these characters in a way that I think if you go with modern action, even in the beginning, when he knows something is going on in this health clinic and he's still just kind of like sneaking around, and it's like, you keep expecting it under modern sensibilities and genre sensibilities. You're like, oh, okay, there's about to be a spark and an explosion and that ignition. And it doesn't really find that ever. I would even say probably here at the end with the action scene towards the end, there's so much of it that happens underwater, which does like just cause a physical effect of slowness in some ways towards the actors in that style. Also, the sound design of that scene is very interesting considering no one can obviously have dialogue and you can't really have guns firing like normal. It never gives you like that experience that you are expecting. And I feel like for a lot of people now, they would be like, this is a wrong way to make an action movie, when rather it probably is just a very different way to make an action movie. And that is something that I think it's less noticeable in the other Sean Connery films from what I remember. Here, I think it's probably heightened a little bit because of the setting and the actual conflict itself. But I think the more I think about it, like I do like these are great movies, the Sean Connery films, where like I would have them kind of just play on a second monitor and just like vibe with these films. Like I
Yeah,
like watching them, but there's something intoxicating about this world where like I do think that bleeds into the screenplay and how it handles character, how it handles dialogue, how it handles conflict. But I also could see how would cause an issue for people who like the action, who like the intensity, who like, the Mission Impossible, the Bourne Ultimatums, the modern James Bond. It's just a completely different genre, really, when you think about it.
yeah. I think it's audience programming as well. I think depending on what era you were born in, and again, what you're susceptible to an era of the early Bourne films and Bond films in the 2000s, and especially like Mission Impossible, is that there's like not to shit on them again, but I think if you're accustomed to the three action beats of the Marvel movies, I think you have this pre-programmed, disillusioned ideal about what an action film is, and there's nothing wrong with that because that's a formula that works. So don't get me wrong, but I think when you compare this to Skyfall, no, I won't do that because that's not fair. Because Skyfall's superior to the comparison I'm going to make. When you look at Thunderball to Spectre, I think this is an interesting thing. So let's talk about, you mentioned there about its finale, okay? So the whole point of the film is that there's nuclear warheads are going to get detonated. Spectre have stolen them, and they're going to set them off. But the film is very cavalier, and I don't think that's a conscious thing. I just think that's the way that Bond is. I think we'll get to it, but I think there's a genuine sincerity and a purposefulness of you're ending a film, right, underwater, and you nailed it straight away. I was going to mention this later, where everything is taken down by 50%. You can't run through it. You've got to go with it. It slows you down immediately, and then there's this fight. We're not running around. We can't just get to these nuclear warheads. Everything is stripped back, and it's like this pulverizing like anxiety where you've got to get to the nuclear warheads underground, not underground, underwater. There's this big battle. I love that discrepancy between, it's like having the dream about throwing a punch and everything slowed down, like there's this horrible anxiety that unfolds with that. I think that's genius. If that was done today, that would be 100% notified. That's brilliant. Great set piece, great thematic, great idea of how that's crafted. Yet Spectre just has the biggest explosion ever recorded in the middle of Morocco, whatever it is. Like there's a sentiment, and then there's just an idea. And I think the discrepancy with the two of them is that one is blowing something up for the sake of action, and then one of them is slowing things down, having a methodical way of thinking about it to give anxiety and again, like you said, an intoxicating like inventiveness to it. That you've got something that needs to happen really quickly, yet you purposely put them in a place where it's slowed down. And granted, it's not Einstein, formula. Oh my God, what have they done here? But it's like a little bit of ingenuity that I like about it. It's a little bit of thought process that's in a Bond movie. I suppose you can see that there's other things in it. There's a horrible bit in No Time to Die when like he's finally found the things he can have, and yet you can't have them. That's a horrible thing there, where for a few minutes, that's the sort of stuff that we're looking for here. But it comes very few and plentiful in the latter works of Bond. But I do think that's not a James Bond thing. I feel that's primarily an action motif now, where you need it now. And I think where Bond sort of got away with this for a long time was a pre-credit sequence. I think it gave the viewer on certain occasions like a little bit of not even a playful wink from Russia with Love, but here it gives you a little bit of action, a little bit of sex, a little bit of charisma. He knocks a woman out, turns out to be a man. There's a little bit of fun and jest there, although granted it is a little bit by the by. They know what they're doing there, 100%. But we get the big the jetpack, then we get into the DB5, we drive away. There's Bond, total Bond. And then we get you get to the latter stuff, like the opening sequence to Casino Royale, opening sequence to Spectre, opening sequence to Skyfall. Like there's these big set pieces where you get like this tiny starter of a meal, and then you get the full course. But Thunderball and the early Connery works make you wait for it. You know, maybe that's not necessarily a conscious thing. I don't think they're thinking, well, in 40 years' time, fuck, we've got so ahead of the curve here. I just think that's the mentality of the, one of the greatest films of all time, especially a British film, is The Great Escape, Steve McQueen. It's a 3-hour film. It makes you wait for it. You've got to be inducted into these people's lives. You've got to see a little bit. And I think Thunderball, Goldfinger, and stuff like that, I think it does engage you to a point where he just wants to spend some time. Then also as well, you've got to you forget this. Adjusting inflation, Thunderball is the most successful James Bond film ever. No one talks about Thunderball. It's never in anyone's top 5. No one ever remembers that Tom Jones sang the theme to it. You always get Carly Simon. Nobody does it. Nobody does it better. Adele, Skyfall, Shirley Bassey, Diamonds, and Goldfinger. Matt Monro, who did From Russia with Love, and then you don't. No one ever says Tom Jones, but you never see it on the radio. You never hear it anywhere. It never gets sung anywhere else. I think the titles are always really cool. It's got really good action, but nobody talks about it. And I feel like it's eerily similar to the next one with Nancy Sinatra's "You Only Live Twice." There's a certain era there where people just, you could probably say it was in its pomp. It gets bigger, it gets louder, yet no one really talks about those films, and I always wondered to me why. I think "You Only Live Twice" is the outlier because nothing happens in that film except for Blofeld. Nothing really actually, and there's strange stuff there. He becomes Japanese and afterward. There's like strange stuff, but this is the one where I can't sort of understand to myself why people don't flock to this. It has everything. It's sexy. It's cool. It looks gorgeous. It's aquatic.
Yeah.
There's an attractiveness to this. He's stylish. He's smooth. I love Largo, the villain. I think again, Domino, terrific. Everything underneath. The fashion's outstanding. Everything looks really good. It's comedic. It gets all the beats. It's dangerous. It really wants to flesh its time out. I've always failed to sort of realise, or not even realise, but to sort of examine, why is this the one I find out of Connery's work no one really talks about? I've never met someone who says, like, to me, Thunderball would if I said, like, what's objectively and subjectively. Objectively, I have my top 5. Subjectively, this would be in it. And this is how much I like this film.
Pretty good location, pretty good iconography.
Yeah, there's lore to this as well. He loved the Bahamas so much he went to go live there. Connery, I believe he died. He passed away in the Bahamas with his by his family's side. There's an affection for this place. So it obviously meant a lot to him being there. He was a shipyard worker in Edinburgh who became James Bond and lived and breathed the role. And then lived in the Bahamas. Like, it's just an interesting sort of film where it feels like very sentimental to the filmography. Perhaps it's not attributed to a lot of the James Bond lore because of what I mentioned before with Kevin Conroy and Spectre. Maybe because they were so far sort of stripped away that there wasn't a conscious connection to, I want to talk about this, therefore have to pay rights to that, because it always comes egregiously like money, isn't it? There's always economic value. My pessimistic mind is sort of saying that, but I mean, I really like James Bond theme tunes here, so I've got to be careful what I'm going about. But did you like the Tom Jones rendition here?
I think this is one of the stronger ones overall. I really like it, yeah.
Passed out recording it.
Oh, didn't know that.
I'm here all day, probably not for an hour and a half before I get booted off. But there's so much here. Like, it's just so interesting. After Goldfinger and 64, you get to this, and it sort of doesn't have the. Do you know what? If I'm going to play devil's advocate here, I'm going to be the white man. I'm going to play devil's advocate, right? You could argue, right, that this is a step back from Goldfinger in a sense that you don't have the cool, strange iconography of its not a hitman, but like a secondary villain. I can't remember what the word is. Henchman,
yeah.
In Odd Job. You also don't have the big brash villain of Goldfinger or at Goldfinger. You don't have a big brashness of it. You don't have the big bang finale. You don't have a pussy galore. you could say that arguably, looking at this in contemporary times, that this was perhaps a step back because it doesn't have the Shirley Bassey thing. It has a male Tom Jones singing it, so it becomes quite masculine because there's something like incredibly sweet and persuasive with Shirley Bassey's renditions of Goldfinger and Diamonds Forever. You could then say, well, it doesn't have like again, you've got no great henchman in it, which I think I would probably argue that's probably correct, but I don't think it needs one because it doesn't need to go that way. Maybe the people who went to go watch Goldfinger were accustomed to that. That's the going forward of what the formula is going to be, and this was like, no, we want to make from a Sharova game, we want to make a Doctor No thing.
Yeah.
If this could come before Thunderball, if this could come before Goldfinger, I think people would probably attribute this higher up the I think it probably would be higher in the.
Well,
in
this
the
did really well on release, right? Like at the
It did.
time, this did very,
It was
very
a more
well.
successful James Bond film, yeah.
So whatever the issue is, it must be more of a contemporary like retrospect rather than people at the time just never connected with it because it was very big.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd probably say I think what you listed there as far as what this film is lacking, whether or not the film needs it, ultimately, I don't think is the question.
Yeah.
And I think it doesn't need it. But if you're going into James Bond with this mindset of what James Bond is, I think having a villain who ultimately probably lacks. I mean, he has an iconography to him, but he doesn't necessarily have the intensity and some of the outward iconography as some of the other villains in there.
He's not silly
I think
either,
no, he's not silly. I don't think he's very human. He's a very like I mean, and like they're all humans, obviously, and I don't know if that comes across what I mean, but like he's very grounded as a villain compared to a lot of the villains out there. He doesn't have the presence, I would say, as some of them, but it does. I think the action at the end, to be honest, really the slowness of the action, because it is underwater, I think that takes a lot of people out. I think probably just the slowness overall, like even compared to the other Connery films, this is one that moves noticeably slower. I think if you're vibing with it, which I think audiences at the time did, I think it connects well. I think if you're looking for that more action-packed James Bond, I can see how this one probably fails with those expectations and fails to live on in the memory. I don't necessarily know if this is one where like the placement of it would affect what people nowadays think. I think it probably came out at the correct time for the era. I mean, we talked about this, both you especially, about how this is a transitional period for Bond. It feels probably even a little bit ahead of its time for the franchise in a lot of ways. I just don't think when people look at Bond overall, but especially this era of Bond, this is necessarily what like I don't know, the film Twitter masses, let's say, would look for.
Yeah. Also, as well, you mentioned something earlier about campness, and there's a little bit here, but it's not at the detriment of itself. It's not doing it like unironically in a way, or even ironically. I can never remember which one that way it goes. But when you look at Goldfinger is probably remembered in the zeitgeist in the canon because it's also like consistently reiterated in Goldmember.
Yeah,
like it's made fun of because you've got a villain called Goldfinger who likes gold and has a gold pistol. You know, like
yeah,
it's silliness. It's camp. It's silly.
of course.
Okay, Thunderball doesn't have that. Okay, Largo. I've been to Rome. Went to Rome with my wife like 15 years ago, 10 years ago, right? Okay, I've met that man. I've met him in a bakery. On a serious, I have like 100%. Not him, but I've met an Italian man who was there just smoking. Like what, how are you doing? He's like, and then it's just like there's a European. If we had the Italian here, he could have my back here. But because he's gallivanting away wherever he's in Berlin, living the dream. He's never gonna live this down. I hope he's listening to this because he could have backed me up. Now I just sound like a racist, okay? But I've been to Italy. It's such a European mentality. I love it because it's simply a villain who has got no extremes. There's no silliness to it. It has an eye patch. I love it. It never ever questions that. We don't know if you got it in the war. We don't know if you got it. Fight for whatever side. Obviously, would have fought for Mussolini and the Nazis. I can't imagine he was fighting against them. There's like in the 60s. There's always that element of, 15 years before here, this world was a very different place, and Bond would have been in intelligence. If we're doing it in contemporary times, the pieces have fallen away, but they're fallen in wherever they want to go. So there's always an interesting attribute of where that character would have been as an Italian. But again, like I love the fact that it's very much non-committal to anything. You know, like I said, the eye patch. We don't know where it gets from. It's great character. I love
Yeah.
Largo. I think it's just simplicity.
Yeah.
He's a nasty man, but he's a man. He's not even Bond's equal to an extent.
Yeah.
But he's been there and done that, and he's just working on the back, and he's just one of quite a few people, especially in the beginning. But the guy doesn't even sweat at the beginning. I love that. Like, that's another small detail I love at the beginning where they're all like sweating pellets when the guy gets electrocuted, and
Yep.
he's just there. He's like there's just like subtle detail there, which is so simplistic yet
Yeah.
effective. Like, and again, but those sequences are parodying itself in later Austin Powers movies.
Right.
Whereas this one doesn't allow itself to be. I mean, granted, you can make silliness about this. Again, the drag opening sequence, like but it's making itself like fun of itself, but not at the detriment of itself. That makes any sense.
Yeah, totally.
And I feel like throughout this film doesn't fall into that gap where I think a lot of Roger Moore films,
Yes.
it's trying to make fun of itself while also like being very very silly, like having like Beach Boys playing "A View to a Kill," and then having the woo in the Man with the Golden Gun. There's like oh, that'll be fun, and then in retrospect it's like, oh, we should not have done that. There's like silly things
Yeah.
there. This does not fall into that. It's very very straightforward. It's also a Connery star that you can get the impression that he's obviously not done just yet. He's still there. He's still on board. He wants to explore this character, and I get the sentiment he's still having fun. That's going to change in a year's time, quite drastically on the press course, where someone asks him about Japanese women. Go look it up. Probably shouldn't have said it. Definitely probably shouldn't have said it. And then I think he's just full out. I'm scorched earth. I've had enough of this. They're not paying me enough. But I think with the fourth film, with this making so much money, you have to remember that he falls out of love with this character after this film. And I think this is the most highest paid, this is the most highest earning film, and yet the money doesn't change for him. They're only going to see these films for one person, and it is Sean Connery. There's a reason why Sean Connery is James Bond. Sean Connery's been dead now, I think, for about 3 or 4 years. In the next 20 years, he will still be James Bond. It doesn't matter. The legacy is so cemented, it's untouchable, and everyone who's come before it, come after it, you can only sort of breach it for 1 or 2 films. I mean, Connery had it for about 4 films. Like it's a good success rate. But I really do get that impression that he's there with the character, he's having fun, and I can understand after this why, when you only live twice is made, and what that film's about. And I can't remember any set piece in that aside from the fight on the rooftops and the ending, the big explosion, like where in Thunderball, like even just the fight in the beginning with it at the retreat, or even the bicycle chase, the bike chase. Especially toward the ending, like there's like a really engaging craft of set piece here, where I feel like it just fades in the next one, and then after that, it gets a little bit of life into it, and then we'll get there a different day with that one. But it feels like maybe it's also melancholy. Maybe I put a lot more into it because it's like the last before of its time. Like I think people look at like the first Avengers movie, and it's not very well made in my opinion. It's like 185.1. Like fucking hell, like that really infuriates me. That like why because that's just some numpty who's come off TV and thinks I can't block this. I just can't do it. Let's just blow the image up. How can you do? Anyway, we'll move on from that because that just boils my blood to begin with. That man. But I think that there's an emotional connection to that film because it's the beginning of the end,
right?
But it's also the beginning of something like like it's that strange thing where it's not going to be the same after that because it's going to just be huge, that franchise.
Yes.
But there's a melancholy look at that because it's simpler times, let's say. I feel like in a very similar vein, Thunderball sort of nails that for me. In that, it just again, and not to reiterate, but I just feel like it cements itself as before and after, and I really like what comes before this. I really do, but there's something I think we both mentioned this. I think Paul Price as well. Like there's something about aquatic movies as well, like with
Oh yeah,
sharks and stuff. I don't know if that's a male
that's
thing or
great.
just a
Yeah.
strange thing. I don't know what that is, but I like that attribute to it. It's just very singular, very identifiable. And I know we're going to talk about a few bits later, but sometimes when I think about Bond and where it goes and where it's going to be about, I feel that sometimes it often not fails to sort of outdo itself. But when I look at Bond movies and we go from here to there to here to over there, I feel like you don't really get to explore certain things about it. And Our Majesty's Secret Service is probably my favourite James Bond film because it nails that we're here, we're going to stay here, and we're going to explore here. And I think Skyfall also gets that with its third act.
Yep.
You could probably say Casino Royale as well. I think that's also
Yes.
fair enough.
That'd be the third one for sure.
Yeah,
Maybe No Time to Die.
yeah, to a certain extent. And I think, you know, GoldenEye jumps all over the place a little bit, and then Tomorrow Never Dies, and then World Is Not Enough again jumps all over the place.
Yeah.
Die Another Day, we'll move on. But even when you look at like Dalton stuff, like License to Kill, yeah, maybe, and then you look at the Roger Moore stuff, it's sort of like aside from Live and Let Die, and it jumps back and forth. And again, not again, please anyone out there, don't find this offensive. But New York's not very fun. You know, it might be fun in Taxi Driver, but it ain't fun in a James Bond movie. You know, it's just stuff like that. Although that film is quite interesting as a black exploitation film, like made by like white people with James Bond in. It's just very strange at this time, but I feel like this nails that really soft part where it's we're gonna be somewhere, but we're gonna have fun there. We're gonna spend quite a lot of time there, and then someone was like, "Well, James Bond flies everywhere. James Bond, like, we got to travel all these exotic places," and again failed to capitalize on aside from you know all this money and it becoming like this corporate thing, like, oh, but James Bond's got to wear this and James Bond got to wear that and stuff. I feel like it's definitely the beginning of something very different to me. Maybe I find it melancholy as a
Yeah.
approach.
I think it's interesting. I mean, obviously, I come from an American perspective where I think people really like the Daniel Craig's. I mean, not even all the Daniel Craig stuff. I think that era is in our zeitgeist. I don't know if there's that much like. I think people like the concept of Bond, and people like certain Bond films. Goldfinger is very big, right? I don't know if there's necessarily this identity where a lot of people who actively talk about Bond or watch Bond have like this emotional connection with this franchise. How I assume just British overall do. I know at least you do, at least hearing you speak. So I wonder if that weight or that even that narrative, that conversation is one that is lost on some people. I also will say just I have become over the last 5 years, let's say, very, very like pessimistic about the ability of people to watch movies and understand things like tone, understand things like or I guess I'll just say to like grade films or judge films or engage with films on their level. I think it's dire, to be honest, and I could go on for hours about it. Um, when there's something though like the campiness in this film in a movie that, as you mentioned, takes itself pretty seriously, I think there's people who look at that, who will look at the jetpack, for example, and will just immediately tune out and be like, oh, this film is incompetent in a way because this moment of campiness is not being bled into the entire feature. It is not making a joke of itself. So then therefore, because there are campy elements, this is a badly made movie,
Yeah,
which I think is very unfair. I mean, I think we both agree there. And I think it's just, again, a bad take on tone, a bad take on comedy and personality. I guess also just, I mean, obviously Austin Powers is a big reason for this, but I think there are a lot of people who cannot engage with older Bond, especially really, let's say Bond, up till GoldenEye, maybe. Even then, I would probably say a lot jumped to Casino Royale, where it's like they cannot engage with Bond beyond those films, unless it's out of an idea of parody or an idea of like this is going to be this silly dumb Bond film. At least the American perspective, again, it is interesting that we have this different cultural understandings, but I just think people maybe don't give this film or give Bond films in general, because this is still not my favorite Bond film. I don't think they give them necessarily the time of day to even like converse or think or engage with this thing as like an actual work of like cinema and art. Not necessarily that it's highbrow, but I think probably if you want to talk about the conversation here, the reaction to this, the reception, the legacy, those things get in the way. I feel like I hear a lot more about actually like some of the more stuff because it gets into that campy, almost parody section. And that is what people I think expect from this genre for some point, but also that's the spy genre. Like when you go into Kingsman and stuff, like it's constantly a genre now that is like taking the piss out of itself in a way that is like very not bad, because I think those films have skill and there's reasons and comedy's good and everything, but I think it's probably a little bit unfair to the actual like identity and history of this genre.
Oh yeah, 100%. There's two things there. I think to talk about how people read the medium now, it is an element that has been like from the 30s to like now. It's like every other decade, and we've had this chat before. To me, I speculate that on because the medium's an ever evolving thing with tone, with genre, with how mood changes as you grow older. The experiment is there's an attribute where cinema's still, okay. So when cinema gets put on screen, it dies because it ages. Well, it just stops living at that point. You know, it dies because everything that happens from that moment forward ages, and this doesn't. Okay, one of its strongest elements is it can live forever. You know, Boris Karloff will live forever. Bela Lugosi will live forever. Sean Connery will live forever. John Wayne, Elizabeth Taylor, Audrey Hepburn, all these people, Betty Davis, Jean Harlow, these gorgeous people from a time gone now, they'll always live forever. So cinema has that encasing of something there, and there's a beauty to that. But the one thing about cinema is that it also evolves due to its audience. It's a symbiotic relationship. So the image can change because consciously or not with the image, the actor can do something that we then, as a population, either reject or rejoice. You know, so on and so forth. We were seeing a lot of that now. We saw it a lot in McCarthyism, and we see it a lot throughout history for certain things. There's also cultural things that change, which is happening now as well, which has happened in the 80s. There's a lot of, it happens. It's not a problem. Yet in the same token, I think perception of how we see things changes. And I think horror is one notable attribute, yeah, because of, like I've said, things age because the inventiveness of the medium, again, is constantly evolving from what we were able to do then, what we're able to do now, you know. 100 years ago, a train as a moving image frightened everyone in a cinema. Now it's social commentary about regressed racism, let's say. Okay, things change for different audiences, for different political climates, or social commentary. That's the beauty of cinema. The issue we've got, I think, is that people be pre-programmed not to sort of have the respect or literacy skills, or not literacy, but like the skills to read certain things. You know, there's a reason why that film with the train is so important to historical cinematic experience. And the same way that Regan coming down the stairs in The Exorcist, it's the same thing. But because one isn't scary anymore, and the other one, people laugh at it, I think that's the reading of those two things by an audience is quite, like you said, it's quite disappointing. But I think when you look at how society and audiences respond to the moving image now, it is 30-second clips. If you don't get it, you're stupid. Everything needs to be explained because it's all about farming engagement. You go back 10 years ago and it's just as bad. You go back 10 years before that in the early 2000s, you have the moment of like the stoner comedy era. It's difficult to sort of, with audiences, like TV in the 2000s blows up as well, 30-minute intervals. I think there's a lot of like mad science behind it all. And I think for an audience to sit down and watch a fucking documentary now is hard work because of how people read what's truth and what's subjective and what's objective. How can a documentary be uh, objective if it's made by a human being? How can someone rationally find all the very interesting stuff? Like the science and the actual uh, brains and stuff like that. Really interesting stuff. But again, we'll move on from that because it'll be here forever. But I do think it's a media thing where I think very slowly but surely since the 90s, we've been sort of engaged to have formats that are getting tighter, withered away, withered away. And since the 2000s, I've had 26 years of that. You've had less, don't get me wrong, but you'll be worse because you'll have been in the Facebook, TikTok age. Whereas I remember having to watch a video, and you fast forward the video, you'd fuck it up. I remember watching TV, you had ad breaks during that. Now, like, it's not a thing, like Netflix and stuff. And gonna sound like a fucking old man here, but I do think it's relevant to the conversation now, where to engage with like a 3 hour film like Beau is Afraid and stuff like that, and Eddington, or just other works of that, like Yorgos works, like Kinds of Kindness and Begonia. There are risks because you've got to engage with an audience that's susceptible of it being able to sit there. I mean, how sad is this? Like, we're having a conscious conversation that can you sit there for 3 hours? And granted, we've both got jobs. It's difficult to be able to do this during the week, during the work day anyway. You just can't do it. So you've got to find time to do it. 3 hours is a long time. And if you would have asked me 10 years ago, I'd have been like, break a film up for 3 hours. You mad? I would have that's against policy. Now, fortunately, it's the way I've got to do it. I'm at work. If I can get half an hour, I'll go in my car and watch a half an hour of a film. I did that with Ziegfeld. We did. I just couldn't break that film down for 3 hours. Couldn't do it any more than that. And it's difficult to watch that because the film's made to be a set piece. So I'm susceptible of being a villain here to a certain extent. But I don't think having a 3-minute TikTok video helps the format. And I think when you look at Bond in the 60s, or any sort of 60s work, and the main villain here is the Western, because John Ford or John Wayne stuff, like Rio Bravo, like for 2.5 hours or at least 2 hours, where it's slow and everyone talks like this and nothing much happens into it. It's difficult to sort of get into that when you can watch something that's fast paced and stuff like that. So I think Bond is a byproduct of its era, in that why are we waiting for 30 minutes for Bond in a spa when Bond needs to be going out there and doing something? Why is he not here? Why is he not there? And I think people also come accustomed to the fact of like, not there's like an ego with an audience, but we've had these chats before where I think the audience now begin to dictate what they want to see and don't want to go on that journey because there's so many options here. It's like, well, I want to go, like, I don't want to watch James Bond do that. I want to watch James Bond to do this. And because there's like a massive volume of this, you can probably pick and choose. But equally in the genre, you can do that now. Like, why would anyone want to go watch Thunderball when you can watch Born? And that's Born with a B. I just think that's far for an audience of a certain caliber. That's fast paced. It's inventive. It's quick editing. It's simple. It's effective. Where the slower paced time of a generation is gone. The one thing I do want to mention, the second thing you remarked about that is the campness. The thing with Bond, right, is that in hindsight, changing its tone has been quite generous to them. Because in hindsight, you've got, 5 or 6 actors here, and all the genres turn. Let's say the tone, not genre. Connery is serious, Dalton is silly. Sorry, Moore is silly, Dalton is serious, Brosnan is the middle, Connery is serious. Craig is serious. Okay. In hindsight, that's brilliant because you've got an amalgamation of loads of different types of textures, touches, sentiments, flair, sensitivity here, bravado there. Okay, there's a great kaleidoscope of shit there that anyone can find accessible to a certain degree. There's not a Bond film out there that won't work for one person. Equally, however, if you look at it in contemporary times, each time they've done it has been a major risk. To go from this, Thunderball, to a Connery film is like chalk and cheese. And I think how they've managed to sort of successfully maintain that and then go through the other eras, I think they never risked that with Connery. Maybe they did a little bit with Diamonds. I've got to admit, maybe there's a push there to like. I think that's the direction where things start to go because it's like, you know, it's a little silly, you know, like it's like with the two villains and the Bond girl in that one. She's got like a silly name, you know, like in the beginning of the film, he rips off the girl's bra and he's got like sandals on. It's like it's a strange James Bond film. But in the same token, I think they never sort of ran the risk with Connery. And I don't think Connery can play. Well, that's not true. I think Connery could have played Roger Moore's Bond to a certain extent. I don't think Roger Moore could have played Connery's Bond. That probably goes to the power of how good Connery is. But I don't know how. I throw it back to you because I'm really happy with what Connery is as Bond. I think it's very straight laced, but there's a bit of like sensitivity there, but not sensitivity, but sensuality. Let's say, and there's a bit. It's very macho, but there's a bit of like comedy in throughout those. I think it's a perfect balance for it. But do you think if it would have opened itself to a little bit more campness, maybe not to the extent of A Feud to a Kill or anything like that, but a little bit more advantageous, as they would say, do you think that then opens this world up a bit more? Or do you think the fact that they closed it off, closed that character off, if that makes any sense?
What I mean, I think the conversation here also is like, what would be the purpose of this? I like what we get with Connery's work. I like what we get with these films.
Yeah.
I don't mind this. We're sitting here right now talking about Thunderball, so we're not the audience here struggling to engage with this
No, I
or find a
appreciate
reason
that.
to
Yeah.
view it. I think if you picked a direction that was either more serious and more kind of conventional, I guess, what you expect from, you know, the action genre nowadays, or you opened yourself up and you just became a fully camp experience, I do think it would probably help with legacy for a film like Thunderball. I think trying, you know, kind of like having pieces of both is not kind for its current identity or people who want to view this and categorize it very easily. Personally, I don't think it was necessary. But if you just want to talk about legacy, I'd probably agree. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the only problem with that is that we have got an opening to that, and it's Diamonds Are Forever, and that again, the program's the program. So if it's not on the agenda, it's not on the agenda. But I think that's the opening to a different world out there that I think for a lot of people was like, ooh, I think it goes off kilter. But in the same token, I look at Connery and I think Connery in A View to a Kill, like I find that really fun. But in the same token,
Yeah.
I look at On Her Majesty's Secret Service and I think of that ending in that car, and I just think, I just hope to God there's a world out there, an alternate universe, where Connery nailed that and just put all those doubters to bed. You know,
I mean,
I really do. I hope, you know, not to shut on Lazenby, but because I think he's fabulous in the role. But I think that sort of texture was never afforded to Connery,
yeah.
and it's the one element I think that's missing from a great combination of skill and talent, of being loud, being aggressive, having have this wonderful flirtatiousness to him, a seriousness, a bravado, a killer instinct. But there's also like this wonderful fun attribute. But you never get to see that tenderness. And I think in Thunderball they never give him a leading lady to play off that there. I think because there's just never. Again, it goes back to the formula, isn't it? There's never anyone there long enough. You know, there's never
No.
anyone there. And again, if you take that away from Bond, you take a major attribute of what that character's all about. It's the Bond girl of the moment. You know, he's here,
Yeah.
there, and then he's somewhere else. And there's so many women out there, and there's so many places to visit. So I can understand that. But I think Thunderball, it's not. It's one of the films where he sort of finds this girl and saves her and protects her. It's not close to it, don't get me wrong, but it's like if you close your eyes and squint very very carefully, you can see like I don't know, vibrations. Let's say, it's a poor lack of a poor word explanation, but there's like echoes of just something that's there. I think it's the one attribute of this film that I feel like if that was also there, this would be top five work anywhere. It's just
Yeah.
missing that little small attribute of a bit of sensitivity.
I mean, I
That being
think that's what
said,
it's all upon, though, right? Like
yeah,
that's kind
no,
of part
no,
of the
yeah, but I think it's the times, the '60s, a mailman.
sure.
That's not, you know, the '69's a totally different era. It's just very, very different. And '65 is just too early for its time. It's very a macho thing. Vietnam's on its way. The time of it. It's a very difficult time in Britain as well. I think after the fact that it's going to get more difficult in the '80s and '70s and the '80s, and the USA is on a very interesting ride. It's just an interesting time, and I think to be male at that time and look up to that,
Mhm.
it's an interesting sort of role model. Connery's Bond.
Yeah.
When you compare it to Craig, it's somewhat similar, but Craig's Bond is that like there's like the biggest thing that James Bond has is heartbreak, and that's the fucking thing that gets him. He opens himself up once, and it's heartbreak. Everyone who goes through life, if you're not a cold heart bastard, has a heartbreak in it, and it stays with you for life. Like
Right.
it's a canon event for a human being. You get tortured through it, you get stronger, but it's always there. And I think that's where Connery's Bond and Craig's Bond, the two best in my opinion.
Yeah.
Although I do like Dalton's, and Dalton almost gets it, just almost, but doesn't get that again. He's not afforded it, but Craig is, and it's the first film to start off as well, and that's the lineage throughout. And granted,
Yeah.
it's used and abused to a point where it's like a charity appeal almost. It's like we've already donated, don't need to keep on telling about it. Like it's like constant, because they can't go back to anything else than to Purvis and Neil, whatever the writers are. They just can't do anything else. But it's a one lineage throughout that film where it's the backbone that not really no matter what, it's just lingering there like a bit
Mhm.
of a wound. It's a really great little bit of emotive, not pleasure, but like a core there. I feel like the Connery thing is just missing that, and I feel like I'm repeating myself now to a
Yeah.
certain degree. But I just think that it's always interesting to me where I think about what the things I would change. I just think if it was in a different time, and it was afforded that little bit of nuance as writing, like for him to have. That's why I just think it's so important he would have done a Majesty's Secret Service, because he does get
Yes.
married in the next one, but it's just silly, and it's like it just it then makes a mockery of certain things. That whole film next is just, if you look at it within the franchise, it actually undermines quite a lot of stuff because they all film them in the wrong way around. It's Doctor No is like it's actually Live and Let Die. I think that's first because he has a scar on his face in the books. I don't know. You can there's a phrase I was going to use there, but people use it in my work, but it's derogatory. I'm not going to say it, but it's you can only do what you've got, okay? And I think
Right.
Conrad in Thunderball, for me, perfectly embodies the suave, sophisticated, engrossing, intoxicating James Bond character in a world that matches him.
Mhm.
And I think sometimes Bond is a little bit larger than life, and the world around him either has to be as silly as that when we get into Roger Moore stuff, or it's just like a little bit too undermining of that, which I think you could probably say Quantum. Like James Bond is doing, like he's doing everything here, there, and everywhere, and he's after people who have to water. That actually works in the modern day world now, but at the time, it's slightly silly when you've gone after a syndicate called Quantum. Whereas Thunderball, I think the the suaveness matches all around, and it has that pure '60s thing as well. But
Right.
I'll throw it back to you for anything else. Um, but I think it just it looks beautiful to watch.
Yeah. I mean, I think to your credit, if you just changed like the identity of what these films were, is there a way to add more texture and more through lines and more emotional weight to certain scenes in this character and develop this character? Absolutely. And that is something you see beginning in 2005 because they were ripping off Batman Begins, right? Like they were trying to um change that character, change the identity of this franchise to match the changing of the filming and the filmmaking um around that time. So I think I agree. I think it's a little unfair, and at various points in the franchises it touches on it. I would say for me that it's a little bit unfair to put that like not expectation, but just like I guess I just don't think it was on their mind to where they could have pictured that. So I
Yeah.
don't necessarily hold it against them for
No,
not
no, I
delivering
agree
that.
with you. Yeah.
It's just part of I would say it's part of the bond. Um, I mean, every single story being pretty much episodic and having new characters and new women. It does affect it. I mean, I think Sean Connery is my favorite Bond, to be clear, and I think that his acting ability. I wish he was able to have more emotion. I wish he was the actor genuinely probably throughout all of them. I think he has a really great persona that can play well with both comedy and seriousness. Um,
I have a
but I
question
also
to
think
ask
that's
you.
just something though you got to live with. Yeah, what's up?
I know that you're not the biggest James Bond fan, but you have started with the Craig movies and then have sort of worked backwards.
Yes.
How do you feel about the episodic nature to the early stuff compared to the sort of franchise sequels to the new stuff? Which do you prefer? Because this is actually like a big thing within this fandom now.
Yeah. It's really difficult. I mean, I think I tend to prefer the more franchisey through lines. We're following this
Ooh,
character develop. Not that I necessarily love, and we'll get there. Not that I love every entry in the Craig series. I kind of feel like it's a series that's very like one on, one off, one on, one off. So I
yes,
really like Casino
yes.
Royale. Really, really like Skyfall. I like what they do with No Time to Die, though I wouldn't put it on the same pedestal as the other two, but I still would put that above Spectre and put that above Quantum of Solace for me. I could leave both of those films behind and be okay with that. I think the highs you just get with that mindset is so much. I mean, with what you get with Skyfall, as far as emotions, as far as breaking down this character, um, really focusing on the person behind James Bond, and you also get that in Casino Royale. Um, I mean, what other episodic James Bond? You can have fun with those. You can have scenes of emotion, but there's nothing that's going to cut as deep or as effectively or be as memorable as what, in my opinion, those films are able to accomplish. Are you more a fan of the episodic work or?
Yes.
Okay.
Only because I feel like it's never been a detriment to the franchise whatsoever, and I think there's a lineage here. I mean, from your eyes only, references on a Majesty's Secret Service because he goes to visit the grave. Spoiler: his wife who's dead. Um, these films are then referenced quite like solidly in a Majesty's Secret Service as well because he resigns and goes through his drawers and he sees all like the stuff the Thunderball music plays. But with the only thing I don't like about the franchise thing is that I feel like there has to be like a conscious comparison, which I don't think is fair. And also, what they failed mostly to incorporate was a distinctive evolution of that character. Where I know I've said like it's breadcrumbed throughout where the Vesper, the flame who died, and it's always there, the open wound. It can never quite close that like heartbreak. It's terrible, but it's life. And it makes him more human, and therefore more vulnerable and more engaging and immersive to that character. But it's just fucking constantly referenced to a point where it's like you've got to move on now. You've got to either move on or evolve it because it just gets a bit silly. But one thing I think will be fun to play this game and to mention the Bond stands out there. There's a guy called Being James Bond. He's called Joe Darlington. He's wrote a few books about Bond, and he's done like when Bond the new one came out, like what you did. He reviewed them all like with his friend. Really interesting guys. Just like spend like an hour and 20 minutes reviewing like incessantly each one of them and stuff like that. He has a theory. Okay, the first James Bond films, he's like I think his theory was the third one is always the best of the actor, bar two of them. The first one is always really good, and the fourth one, the last one's terrible. And I think throughout here, if we go out through the actors, aside from two of them, I think he's actually probably bang on. Not that we might get there because I don't know what we'll choose, but when you get through each actor, I think that the first one is always solid. Is it the best one? Probably. I wouldn't probably say. I think not really. I think more often than not, no. I think the third one's always the best one. I think that's right. Although, yeah, I'd probably agree with that. I think the third one's always the best one. But it'd be interesting to look at that throughout the filmography. But I think for a
Yeah.
fourth film in a franchise that's still going like this to make decent money, I mean, Christ, do you know for them to be like 26 Bond films in now, and you look at all the failed sort of franchise films that come out, Carson, it's crazy. In 1964, 1965, that already
Yep.
made 4 films, 3 years. Oh, not 3 years, but 62 is Doctor No. So let's say 4 years they've made a film every other year. Do you know they would? There are franchises out now that would die for that. It's like
Oh yeah.
obviously the money's different now. I appreciate that, and I think the market's saturated. But there's nothing like Thunderball at the time. Nothing. And I think that the thing about Bond, again, what you mentioned about reading the film and contemporary, also reading it now, is that you've got this huge saturated market of the franchise. But
Right.
even then, Bond's been on ice. I mean, the last 10 years, there's been 2 films in James Bond compared to every 3 years. I mean, before that, there was a gap of what, 2008 to 2012, 4 years.
Yeah.
And then before that, there was like a gap of what, 1989 to 1996 between License to Kill and GoldenEye. Massive gap. You
Yeah.
know, it's a franchise that it has sort of stalled a few bits and pieces, but they can't make any more Bourne films anymore because no one's interested. They tried to reboot that and it failed, and they made a sequel and it failed.
Yeah.
Mission Impossible sort of stuck its landing to a certain degree, but they're going out on a high.
Yep.
And then Bond's the only one now that's on the cusp of like they're gonna make another one. To look at in contemporary times, to have the same actor who is growing to this obsessive rate of stardom, who is carrying the franchise, it's unheard of now. I can't think of perhaps another franchise that's had a similar attribute to it, aside from perhaps Robert Downey Jr.'s Iron Man, who has carried something to blossom to an even greater to ideal than that, which is just seismic in its own right. But it can't be unprecedented. It can't be understated sort of how unprecedented it is for one man to lead a franchise 4-5 films in to this degree, and they've all been quite successful. I mean, the first 4. I wouldn't say the first 4 Marvel movies are brilliant. I wouldn't say the first 4 Mission Impossible movies are brilliant. I don't think there's very few of them get past 4. I think it's crazy. I mean, they can't even finish trilogies anymore.
No.
You look at trilogies and things like that. There are also a few bits and misses. I think Paul Greengrass's Bourne movies, the first 3, I think that's probably the closest you'll get to completion. But it can't be understated of how successful this was.
Absolutely.
The risk.
I will say, I think that is, and we're not going to, just fall into this trap where every single episode we are on, we fall at the end of just like shit talking cinema nowadays. But I do think I am slightly concerned. Well, I don't know if I say slightly, but when you look at Bond and what you mentioned, how in the past 10 years, there's 2 films, there is something to be said about Bond embracing modern cinema and the flaws of modern cinema, which have consumed every other franchise up to this point, like Bond, where number one, Bond survives because of evolution of genre. Bond survives with experimentation, with just being willing to try new ideas, even if we're not necessarily a huge fan of all of them. Again, the only comparison I can find is something like Godzilla that is evolving and changing genres and changing hands. And that allows it to go for decades and decades and decades. Its episodic nature obviously also helps that, where you have most of the big breaks are between actors. It's not necessarily between movies with the same actor. They're just going. Again, pros and cons on each individual film. Nowadays, when you have this cinematic approach of it all has to matter, it all has to connect, you have to tell an overarching story, it's a big trap, I think, for a lot of franchises. It takes a lot more time to prepare. You have to make it bigger, so you have to have more visual effects. So production is number one, takes longer, but also is just massive. And then if an audience doesn't show up for a film, if an audience doesn't show up for a franchise, for whatever reason, I think Fast and Furious actually is going through this right now. where they're like, well, people aren't showing up for this, so we want to make another one. But now it's a huger fight than before to get money to make another one. It takes longer. You're losing audience interest, and you're not willing to experiment or try something new. Like, the classic Bond was with genres, to where if people are tuning out of the MCU, for example, they're tuning out of the MCU and the MCU is not evolving. They're just like, well, we're just going to keep trying the same thing. This is what kills franchises. This is what forces franchises that have been going for decades and decades to end. It is very concerning to me that Bond, even more so than from Daniel Craig's era, now with Amazon being the leader of this and being the person charting the course, how easy is it for Bond to miss the mark once and for them to kill the franchise? Like, it just, to me, feels like we're walking a very big tightrope, and we've lost a lot of the messaging. And cinema, I think, does this overall, where we've lost some of the messaging of why did this work for decades. And I get, again, Casino Royale to No Time to Die is reflecting a different just type of filmmaking. It's like a different film than what these other films were providing. And there were highs there, undeniably, both financially and critically. But that being the just new status of Bond, that's the new identity of the franchise. For me, it's not one that gives longevity. And sadly, what it's probably going to be, and we just talked about this with Star Wars, is if it fails, if it stumbles like Rise of Skywalker did, we're going to see another decade break, and then they're going to try to come through and just do the same thing again, just like they're doing with Mandalorian and Grogu, which we haven't seen, to be clear, up to this point as we're recording this. So speculation there, allegedly, and it just feels like it's not, cinema right now is not a system to where it's going to get the wheels turning again on whatever dies. It's just going to stay dead, and you're going to have these like lifeless attempts to bring it back, and it's not going to work. So I'm very worried about Bond, I guess, is the message.
I'm 50-50, and I'll say the positive first, and I'll go for the negative, because we've got to end on the negative. That's just ClapperCast integrity right there. The positive is that they've had 6 goes at this now, okay? And each time they've done it, they have not stumbled because they've not given in to what public opinion is. When Sean Connery resigned on You Only Live Twice, what did they do? They hired a 25-year-old Australian who'd been in TV advertisement, and then give him your James Bond. And I mean, if that would have happened now, which I think the idea is that they want to go for an unknown, they won't do that. That's where it's going to come in a little bit later. They can't risk that. They just can't. They can't do it. However, when you look through the time, it was like that we're in charge, we're doing it, and people were accepted of it. They just dealt with it and got on with it. And then they did it again with Roger Moore, had also been the same. That, if that would happen now, that would be crazy. That's like hiring Matt Damon to be James Bond now. It'd be like, what? But that at the time, we're going to make it work, and they made it work. Timothy Dalton, they made it work. A Shakespearean actor. Pierce Brosnan, like, they'll make it work. Daniel Blonde, they called him. The guy who was in Layer Cake, he's already done it. Road to Perdition. He's not a James Bond. It's worked. He's defined the role. That's the positive I've got. Okay? The negative, those people are not here anymore. Cubby Broccoli, Barbara Broccoli, Michael G. Wilson, they're not involved anymore. Those people who were indebted to that character, that livelihood, who were born and bred with that franchise, are no longer here anymore. It's now in the hands of a corporate megamaniac who, like you said, will see numbers before they see lineage. That's concerning, because one will talk more than the other. And I find that with corporate entities, there's one big element there that dictates, and that's consumer. If consumer does not like, consumer does not buy. If consumer does not buy, corporate doesn't make any money. That's what it's all about. So if they fuck this up, I agree with you to a certain extent. There'll be some issues here, because where did they go for it? However, because it's a franchise that's 60-year-old now, and it has its own lineage within the canon, this film will make money no matter what. How it comes out in cinemas or it comes out on Prime, the numbers will be fudged, but it will make money. It'll be profitable, undoubtedly. Denny's in charge. Stephen Knight's writing it. I have concerns about that, but we'll get there. But Denny will do a good job with it. He's the right man for the job, 100%. I'm not here for all that Christopher Nolan shit. because you don't want it overcomplicated. Make it simple. I don't want fucking time stuff. I don't want it non-linear. It has to be simple. It's not fucking Christopher Nolan's James Bond. It's Ian Fleming's James Bond. That's what it has to be. Okay, simple as. You can have your little twists and little turns with it. I have no issue with that, but it has to remain a James Bond film. And Denny, like he's done with Frank Herbert's Dune, he's honoured the books while also doing a little bit to himself. I'm not saying Christopher Nolan can't do that because he did it with Batman, but at a certain extent, I don't want him involved with it. I can't be asked with the fanboys. I'm just not interested. I'm so done with that now. But like you, I think the first entity will make money. The casting, I don't think it will matter. The second one won't. I'm telling you now, they'll fuck this up to a certain extent. Amazon, in that if they do something like they can't do another Origin, but then they can't have a young Bond. That where they're at in the writing stage now is such a different predicament because you can't start early because they're doing it with the game, which is First Light. You can't do the Bond thing already with the Origin because you've done it in Casino Royale. You can have him young, but you can't have him black. You can't have him as a woman. So things start to get tighter, right? You can't then bring other people back. You can't also do the same things as before. So things begin to get tighter and tighter, which is a shame because with Connery and how that and we're getting back to Thunderball, things got smaller and got bigger, a bit more budget, a bit more expression. We're going to go to Jamaica in one place, then we'll go to Venice, and then we'll go to Istanbul, then we'll go to Germany, Austria, Fort Knox. Then the fourth we'll go to Bahamas. We'll go to London. We'll go to Austria. Then you get Japan, and you get Switzerland, and then you get New York, and then in the Caribbean and Live and Let Die. It blossomed. I feel like this is getting restricted every time there's a thing here, and I think if you don't get the casting right, which that's the one that worries me. That why they haven't got that guy in now. That concerns me. Yeah, and it's been 5 years, fair play, but there seemed to be a sort of a confidence with Cubby Broccoli and his partner when they did the Bond movies. It felt like a natural progression, and I think, like you said, it is a slight worry when they'll go forward with it. But the first one will make money, but I think it'll be divisive, and I think the second one they do after that, they can't do it straight away because they can't cock up like they do with Quantum. They can't afford to do that, so it'll be another 2 or 3 years. But like we said about the audiences are in such a point now as a consumer is that they'll dictate where that goes, and I'm really frustrated about that because I don't agree with certain sort of adaptations of things. Certain things really annoy me, other things upset me, other things I have to accept. Sometimes when you look at someone's vision, they put 3 years into a project. They're making it, not me. I have to remember that as a critic. I have to remember that as a fan. I have to look at other people's elements of work, their own vision, their own interpretation. Because ultimately, if I don't, I'll have the same shit every other year, and I become bored of it subconsciously or not. It's an attribute in cinema that it's got to keep on swimming. It can't stop. It's got to keep on moving. And with Bond, I'm going to find it very difficult in the number 26, undoubtedly, and I hope it takes risks. But I get the impression, like what you mentioned, that the consumer wants the same shit every week, day in, day out. And I think with Bond, it's the thing that killed Connery at the end because he was bored of it. It's the thing that killed Roger Moore because it went on too long. Dalton, they didn't get enough of it. Brosnan, I think time got him with where direction was going, and I think time, ironically, not got Craig as well, where it's like you've just taken too long to get these things made, and I think public opinion will have a lot to say about the casting. I think public opinion will have a lot to say about where it goes, and I don't think that's a very good thing. Granted, if they get someone like fucking, I don't know, I don't want to shit on anyone here. I probably shouldn't say this, but if they got someone that you just knew wasn't right for the part, let's say, yeah, I'd be concerned. But in the same token, it's like how long do you let the dog off the lead before you know it's going to bite someone? I don't. If they're going to get someone who's a bit out there and stuff like that, and it just like, oh God, really? But in the same token, not to keep on going on here, but I'll go back to Denny with your friend, little Tim. When he was
Mm.
cast as Paul Atreides, I was like, this is going to be interesting because
Yeah.
he's 4 stone piss sweat through, right? And I feel like if you judo chopped him, he'd snap in half. And yet you look at him in the trailer for the third film and you think, oh my God. And
Yep.
especially in the second film as well, like he's grown with that character.
Oh yeah.
And that's what I think identified that I think Denny's the right man for the job. I think he'll do well here. I really do. That's a positive there.
Yeah.
Stephen Knight frustrates me because he fucked up Peaky Blinders to a degree where I'm really not happy with. And I think his other things that he's done, Stephen Knight, are somewhat suspicious as well. But I'm more positive than you, but I think there's a lot to go right yet, but we'll probably go wrong. But
Let's be clear. I don't think number one is the issue. Denis Villeneuve, fans of the podcast, you get it. I like that we say that every single time just because we don't want anyone to actually think we don't know how to pronounce his name.
no, because that will become a thing, I'm sure.
That, yeah. I have no worries. I mean, even if I don't love every single Denis film, he's a very good filmmaker. I'm not worried about round one. I am worried about round two when they have to get someone else. I'm worried about round three. Also with Amazon, we talk a lot on here about algorithms, and we've talked today about, the audience is going to dictate. I think Amazon tends to be, for being like the largest company in the world with the most data, tends to be shockingly awful when it comes to reading the algorithm. If you look at Prime Originals, every single one has, and you couldn't name any of them, and that's kind of the
I was going to mention this.
every single one has an A-list cast. They have some direct. Shane Black just did one, for example. Everyone has there's quite a few interesting directors that work for them. They all have these A-list casts, and you hear about none of them. You hear about 0 of them. It is completely made for the algorithm in a way that does not understand at all actually how to get people watching or how to create a product that people want. It's shocking. I really don't understand it at all. I do respect them for putting out originals compared to every other streaming service, but none of it lands, right? There's not a single one that lands. So you want to tell me that company is undoubtedly, when Denis leaves after the first one, they're going to see the success and they're going to have to chart the course for the future. I do not have any faith in them to do that. We will see. I'm hopeful. I mean, like, hopefully I'm proven wrong here. Hopefully we're all amazed and wowed, and each one just keeps getting better and better. I also don't think Amazon as a company, though, is one that a lot of directors who I would want to touch this franchise are going to want to touch. It is one that is becoming increasingly politicized. You mentioned politics in this. No Time to Die couldn't even get away from politics with one female character. Yeah. At the same time, you have another crowd who's going to be angry if they don't do anything as far as that. It just feels to me like the worst possible combination in history. We will certainly see, but yeah, I'm not entirely hopeful. But it's not really. I feel like a lot of people, that first one's going to hit. It's going to make a lot of money, going to be well received, and people are going to be like, see, take that. Also, if you don't think they're going to franchise this thing, I'm going to tell you right now, it's going to be all franchise. This is my biggest issue with the Batman, where you can say what you want about Matt Reeves as a filmmaker. I tend to be pretty high on him. Mm-hmm. I even like the Batman as a film. Very clearly, an hour of that film is setting up spin-off series and spin-off shows. If you don't think they're going to try to do the same thing with Bond, that's just what it's going to be, which is so unappealing for me. So we'll see. I think, though, with Bond and with franchises, and this is something where, like, it's weird because we're getting away from this idea. I think it's because so many franchises looked forward and then failed, so they never could get to that final goal. But, like, you really need to be playing the long game or have the long vision ahead of you. I don't know if we have that with Bond here.
2 things on that. I swear to God, I've been up since 6 o'clock, so I might have, like, my brain fade here. I can't remember the last Amazon Prime thing I ever watched. I honestly, yeah, the Shane Black thing with Mark Wahlberg. I don't know what it's called. The Citadel. I see that advertised on Amazon Prime. I mean, I don't know anything on there that I've seen. I probably have done, don't get me wrong, but I can't remember anything like that. They've never also dealt with something as gigantic as this either. Because, like you said, it comes with quite a significant amount of baggage. I agree with you. I think the franchise thing is one that, like, somewhat scares me, because I remember in the press release, the Hollywood Reporter said that Barbara Broccoli and Michael G. Wilson were like adamantly, but like against them making an Eve TV show spin off about Moneypenny. And to me, I'm just sat there thinking, in what world can someone pitch that and that be a success? But the only thing that annoys me about that is that Matt Reeves, like you just mentioned, with the Penguin getting really good reviews, having it sustained, having a big cast member involved. But in the same token, you're going to have a third secondary character who steals the film and make a 10-hour episode. That just seems to me like corporate. Do you know what I mean? Like capitalistic, like just pillaging. And I agree with you. I don't know how that can sustain itself. Yet in the same token, how this works and how this gets advertised, it's not really a dictatorship about the consumer clicking on it. It's going to be made anyway because to these people it's pocket change. And if you can make that 10-hour TV show for $100 million or let's say $200 million, they'll make money on that somehow, even with their own ads. That's the worry, because then what's the conversation against it? The whole thing to bring it back about Connery stuff is that the reason why they can't have the biggest explosion in cinema history is because they couldn't afford it. And inventiveness in cinema comes with being deprived almost. You look at I keep on mentioning horror because I think there's so much ingenuity there, but I think often enough, with a limited budget, your artistic measure and your ingenuity has to take over. It has to try beat those significant milestones of, well, I don't have the money to do it. And I think there's a lot of like early horror movie cinema that does it. I think Bram Stoker's Dracula by Francis Ford Coppola does a brilliant job there about all in-house trickery. I think early James Bond stuff is brilliant, of how it, like, we're in Jamaica. We're actually in Jamaica though as well. For $1 million, it's expensive, it's a risk, but there's an ingenuity there to get over it. Just set it in one place, and this is a franchise that has often enough. I don't know how you would feel this, but I feel like it's a franchise. I keep on saying that Wonder Woman picture. I don't know why I still got that there. Sorry, I need to get rid of that. I don't know if I just look for words when I look at it, thinking like I just think that it's a franchise though that I feel like has never really struggled that like has to be bigger than the other one. I never really felt that watching James Bond. I feel like that's a modern day approach, but back then it's like it felt an ingenuity to make things unique and go against the budget. Whereas it's carte blanche here, isn't it? I don't think that's necessarily a good thing, because when it becomes excessive, it becomes sickly. And I think, like you said, the second director will be quite interesting, because when you look at Martin Campbell, who, let's be quite fortunate here, is not the greatest filmmaker ever, November Man, yet he made 2 stellar James Bond films. So there's obviously like a recipe here. There's an ingredient you can work with, but he knows how to do it. And Denny's going to be brilliant. I don't get me, because he's accustomed to that big set piece, and he also knows intimacy with his characters. But this franchise cannot afford to have another Mark Forster who says, I'm going to make my edits 6 of a second, and we're going to have it rapid. How anyone could have got behind that and said, do you know what? Let's go antithesis to what we made. We made something exceptional, but let's fuck that up and let's just, brilliant. Let's not be able to see anything and not understand anything. And that's exactly what we want. No. Martin, you were slow. You were immersive. You allowed sequences to prolong. We had intimacy. We don't want any of that. We want it quick, like this now. Those type of decisions were made by the people who thought they knew the franchise. And I think when you look at the stuff now, that's going to be difficult, because they have to get it right each time. And also, like you said, who's behind there, who gives a shit? Who's actually they famously, like, Steven Spielberg was like, "Oh, I want to make a James Bond film." Kubrick was like, "Not a chance. First and foremost, you're American. We'll let that slide. My wife's American. Maybe it was a good decision, let's say, but fair enough. Let's just say, that'd have been interesting, but it wouldn't have worked. That's not going to be a thing anymore, is it? It's going to be anyone who they see fit, anyone who they want. And like you said, Apple TV have certain partnerships, Netflix have certain partnerships. Amazon is the one, like you said, is the bit of the outlier, isn't it? It doesn't feel like there's someone who's there now. I know that Spike Lee was there for a little bit with Amazon Studios, but he seems to have been floating from here, there, and everywhere, Apple TV and Netflix with The Five Bloods. So it's an interesting one where it hasn't housed an auteur yet. Let's say. I mean, you could probably say maybe Catherine Bigelow, even to an extent. With I think Detroit was something to do with Anna Perner in that, but that she went to Netflix with other stuff as well. So I don't know. I think there's no in-house character there. There's no one there to take it. But in the same token, there's so much to think about here about going forward, and no, I don't want this franchise to die because that'd be quite silly. But I can't believe that we're talking about where it is now. That's crazy. From 1964, where we are now, Thunderball, to get to where we're sort of like 60 years later, and it's quite tepid times, isn't it? It's a strange one. Simplistic's not always the worst thing. I think the complication of an audience has just routinely just destroyed this. I don't know. I have optimism, but fucking hell, I've been here so many times now and be like, I'm really optimistic. Why have we got to have 9 Spider-Man movies? Why have we got to have all this stuff? I mean, it's just crazy at this point now. It really is. But I think as a spectator like you are, I think this franchise has been so much through different paints, different skins. Not really ever made a big jump drastically in terms of character, but it's always been interesting how it's gone through the times. I mean, a 2020 James Bond movie is going to be very strange,
Yeah, we'll see.
I mean, how to pander to an audience in the year 2020 in this decades. They didn't like Sonic, so they redrew him like twice. Like what? You know what I mean? Like it's crazy times that we're in. I can't. If you think about something like that in like the 60s happening, like no, we hate it. It's like you just accepted it, and moved on. That's not my Daredevil.
No, for sure. Yeah, it is wild. And I hope this summer, as we continue this series, maybe we'll get so many updates on this Amazon thing and maybe even get casting and we can check on through with this. Because this is a series. Go for it.
I've got just this thing to ask you there, right? Just very quickly. Because I know we're jumping to something that's not even real here. Let's say there's 3 things here, okay? And this is going to sound silly, but there's method in my madness here. There's going to be 3 major castings here, isn't there? There's going to be Bond.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Let's go with the villain.
Yep.
And let's go with the theme song.
Oh, interesting.
If you were Amazon, which of them in order would you announce first and why?
Oh.
Because traditionally... no. Actually, let's not do the villain. Let's do the name.
Yeah, so that makes it more difficult.
Yeah, usually it goes Bond, then it goes the name, and then it goes the song. I think there's a method in madness here. I don't think they'll do the traditional route. I think there's one obvious one, but I don't know.
I feel like they probably will go the traditional route. I don't know. I could see title being first. I mean, I think song will be last.
I can as well.
I could see title being first. Mm-hmm. The one thing is like they very publicly, the week we're recording this, ironically enough, randomly, we're starting casting. They're already hyping up the cast part of it, but I could see title first.
How do
they do it with? I'm sure you remember with Force Awakens. Did they announce title or cast first?
Oh my god! Well, they did a table read, didn't they? Oh my god!
I don't remember.
We were stands. I was there day one. I don't know. It would have had to have been cast first, surely. It would have been cast first.
I
But
don't
if you think
know.
about it, if Stephen Knight's going through the script now, they'll have a title at least. They'll have
I'm
something.
sure they already have a title. Yeah.
You would have to cast Bond first. You'd have to. But if you wanted to sort of just test the waters like they did with Natasha Lynch, where it was like, the Daily Mail have got a scoop. Wow, what a coincidence! How did that happen? I think they would. I think they would go to the tabloids first, and not the tabloids, but I think the smart way to do it would be title first,
Yeah.
then you Bond. Get the Rocky Waters out first, then the title. The title, then Bond, then the title song. Because I think if you did Bond and it was a bit rocky, then it was called something that was a little bit suggestive or silly, it would get annihilated.
Yeah.
But if you did the title first, like if you did The Force Awakens first, or The Last Jedi, what does that mean? I think there's like a
Right.
there's a you can within media, I think you can work with that. But if you did Bond first and it went down the shitter very quickly, that title's not rescuing anything, is it?
No, not at all.
But I don't, like you said, as a
Mm.
Amazon, I wouldn't know how they would. I don't know how they would work. I don't think they can even
It might
advertise.
be title first. You're right.
It's crazy times. I mean, like, if you think about the original titles of stuff and the narratives, they were all based on Ian Fleming's work, but
Right.
but very loosely based on the material. So the titles all come from it.
Do
Like,
you think it's going to have like a normal title like the rest of them, or do you think it's going to be like 007, like something?
oh no, it'll have to be something like it can't be silly, but it'll have to be something silly because all the original stuff, bar I think Property of a Lady and 007 New York, they've all been used, all of them. Like Quantum of Solace is a short story or mentioned in something. And then Living of Daylights is a short story, but everything else is primarily works of Ian Fleming. Um, and they had the luxury of they announced the films in the credits as well, which I think is quite cool
Yeah.
back then. But then change a few, like Moonraker, they changed that beforehand. They don't have that luxury now. So, yet in the same token, they don't have to build
Do
anticipation.
you think there's any chance they remake one?
I don't know. I think you can't do that now, can you? Because it's a legacy thing.
Well, I know they were against it after Casino Royale. They were like, there was a rumor that they were going to remake them, and they were like, no, those were perfect. Like, we don't want to remake anything. But
Yeah, there was also a rumor about Rami Malek being Doctor No as well. I remember that. But I also, from my friend who works at Pinewood, told me because he told me that James Bond died. He was like, "You're not going to believe it." I was like, "What?" I was like, "He has a daughter. She's on the call sheets. Madeline, his daughter." I'm like, "Oh shit!" And he was like, "They're doing a lot of reshooting here." I was like, "Oh, why?" I remember he's like, "Oh, it's COVID," and I was like, "Oh shit, yeah." But apparently, he told me, or not he, sorry, they told me. Sorry, they told me. I'm gonna be careful. They told me that it was actually a COVID-inspired plot. It was actually a virus that was changed during thing. It became like it was a virus.
yeah,
This was a bit different. They had to change a few things because if you look at the bats, the vats, not the bats. You've got me on Batman. The vats in the Chinese or the Japanese island, should I say? Well, I don't know what that's all about. Like, I don't. Anyway,
right,
I think
right.
there's a different. I think there's different things where they sort of change things due to politics, let's say. And I think Natasha Lynch was one. The one thing I'd say this to end on a bitter note is if there's anyone fucking pissed off about what's happened here, it shouldn't be her. Why they didn't just roll the dice for one film as her as 007? Like, just have it as Natasha Lynch as 007. Don't just retire James Bond for fucking 3 years and then finish that. Just see what it's like within within.
Yeah,
I want to say society, but that's quite sick. But I just think release it within the world and see how it does, and then go on from here. I feel like it was a missed opportunity to engage with that because you'd planted the seed anywhere, and why
yeah.
not? Why not have a bit of fun with it? I think she's pretty good in the film. However, if you look at
I think if you
Ballerina,
listen to the algorithm, I can see why you wouldn't if you were afraid of
yeah,
certain things. But
because
The
she's a woman
ballerina?
and she happens to be black, and
Right.
most people out there seem to have a difficult relationship with the two of those things, which is very
Shout out the
strange. But
Odyssey.
there we go. Yeah, very, very, very strange. But in the same token, you look at ballerina, come from the
Mhm.
world of John Wick, and he's in that, and it shit the bed, doesn't it? So it's an interesting thing there. You've just. I mean, we both haven't seen it, but there we go.
Only
I
Nicholas
think that's
Sarah.
I think yeah, I think that's the main point there, where you can get it as close as you can get, but you're still very far away because audiences don't want to engage with that, because maybe that's why it's off. I don't know. Um, I remember dying of a day they were going to do a Halle Berry spin off, and that died of death.
Yes.
Thank God for
Well,
that.
yeah.
Jinx.
I'm not. I didn't stay up overnight thinking about that.
No,
Sadly,
I didn't write any letters to MGM then, but I've got it on my email anyway. But I think it'd be very interesting. Um, I think they'll reference the earlier stuff now. Yeah, I think they'll have the scar undoubtedly,
yeah.
because that'll be interesting to have that as a counter programming to all of its villains, which I think is interesting, but is nothing more than that. I think it'd be interesting. Yeah, I think they'll fuck the villain up 100% because they constantly do it. But just have a human being. Like
Yeah.
human beings are terrifying for that. If anything in our history, this is going to go really dark. This podcast, we've gone from like the bowels of
Right.
the beast to this medium to like evil dictators. But if you look at the last 100 years on planet Earth, it's just nasty men. That's
I
all it
like that
is.
you
It's
could have
nasty.
referenced Thunderball, how the character there is a human, but instead you went Hitler. But that
Yeah,
was
yeah, yeah,
fair.
yeah. Exactly. These are horrible human beings. You just got
Yeah.
to look at history about certain dictators, and even where we're living now, it's human beings making horrible decisions who have
Wow.
done horrible things. And
And
I
if
think
anyone's
this is
gonna realize that, it's Amazon. Let's be
yeah,
clear.
yeah. Mr. Bezos can perhaps cast himself in a role. I'm not too sure in
Wasn't
what,
there a
but
rumor that his wife is gonna be like in it?
I think he's sent to
I don't know if I made
space.
this. I don't know. I might be making
I
this
mean,
up,
she's
but I
got sent
thought
to
I read that
space.
somewhere.
It's crazy stuff, isn't it? Like it's just fucking crazy. Like it's stuff like Richie Rich stuff. Like he's got a bank vault in the thing in North Dakota where it is. I don't know. I've been there as well. Mount Rushmore. That's the one. For the Americans out there. But again, going back to the point, I don't know what I was on about, but it'll be interesting. It'll be interesting to see. I'm looking
Yeah.
forward to it at least because it's just going to be a cluster, and some of that it'll be interesting. But um, I'm glad that we can look back at Thunderball and have just so much fun with it, like the good old days.
Mm,
It's nice to watch something like that and have something slower. I
yeah.
don't know how you felt. Maybe it's my old age, but I liked watching that. Like
Yeah.
I actually watched it on Christmas Eve. I'm gonna log it twice. Last year and this year. That's how far behind I am. I'm on the 24th of December with my Hooktober because work's been a pain in the ass. But I do watch these James Bond films around that time. I always watch Managed Secret Service on Christmas Day. I always watch Skyfall on Christmas Day. And I watched Thunderball Christmas Eve. And I loved just watching it. Like the fire was on down at my mother and father-in-law's with a dog next to me, and a pint of Guinness. And it was like it was just middle like 8 o'clock, dark. These like blue lights with it. It's just gorgeous to watch. It's a slow, really nice ambience to the film. A time where it's not. It wants to take its time to explore. It's never condescending. It's a really richness and fullness of a cinematic experience that I think within the canon, especially within Connery's, but I think throughout, it's one of the lost ones. I think For Your Eyes Only is probably another one where it gets lost. And then perhaps like The World Is Not Enough for Pierce Brosnan, and maybe Quantum for Craig. There's always feels like there's one that's the outlier, but I think this is the most underrated of them all, and it's shocking that no one gets to talk about it. But I was really happy to. This is one of my favorite Bond films.
That's wild. I randomly picked all these pretty much, so I'm happy
It's,
that you love it. Yeah.
do you know what breaks my heart about this though? It's the only one I don't have on 35mm
Wow.
scanned. And do you know what? There's two films I'd actually kill for. Not legally, anyone out there, but I'm just saying that if it came to it, it would be a difficult choice. I'd like to watch this on 35mm, and like to watch Matrix Reloaded on 35mm. The only two that I'm really bothered about. That being said, I would like to watch Heat or Public Enemies, something like maybe Heat. Anyway, I go on, but I would like to have seen this with its scratches and stuff like
Oh
that.
yeah.
But in the same token, the Blu-ray and the 4K is extraordinary.
Do you have the set? Do you have the Blu-ray set with all of them, or
No, I have more digital. I don't really, though I'm going to get absolutely fucking torn to pieces here. I don't actually collect physical media anymore.
yeah, I don't either. To be fair,
I just don't have the room for it. And also, as well, I just bought them on Apple TV when they all was on like sale. But I look back at these and they all look brilliant as well. I love the colours to it. But you can fuck around with the 4K settings anyway. I've been swearing a lot here, but it's late. I do apologise.
no worries.
That's my expression of how much I love this.
Good. Well, I'm happy you love Bond. We'll continue to talk about Bond all summer long because we're having a hot Bond summer. I do quickly want to read Chris Santon again. Was supposed to be here. He sent over some thoughts. He said the first 10 minutes were insane for someone who's only seen 3 other Bond films with Casino Royale, Spectre, and Quantum of Solace. Gorgeous locations with excellent underwater final act. I own and have seen all the Austin Powers films, and a lot of the jokes make so much more sense now. Fair enough. Made me want to watch more of these, to be honest. I know he really enjoyed this watching it. I think he gave it 4 stars. So sorry Chris couldn't be here, but I'm happy he loved it.
For the 4th film in as well, 4 stars. I think that's decent. And to be fair, I think we take it to granted. If this was your first Bond film and you opened up with this film,
it's crazy.
Like he's why is he beating a woman, now a man, and then why is he flying a jetpack? And there's a bravado to that where it's like it very much is parody. So I can imagine that would be quite fun. But I'm glad that his journey starts in a decent way. But it's a good film to start with as well. It's not a thing silly. I mean, if he gets to the next one, he's fucked. But I mean, I think you start from Dr. No and start from there. I think you have a really good time with it. But
yeah, for sure.
Austin Powers.
Well, we will continue this journey next month. We are next time talking about, I'm sorry, we're just doing a Christmas double feature for you. Next time we have On Her Majesty's Secret Service. Yes. So can't wait to get into that one. Of course, we're going to include it. With that, let's go to our question of the week to wrap this up. What is your favorite Sean Connery Bond film? Jak, I feel like I know the answer for you, but just go ahead and confirm it. And specifically, why is it You Only Live Twice? Is what I'm.
No. Have I ever tried to make anything out like that? I don't know where that's come from. There's like again objective, subjective. Like From Russia with Love is the best James Bond Sean Connery film by far. But I've always found Goldfinger to be very affectionate towards me. I've always really loved that film for personal reasons, like Shirley Eaton in it. I just think it's like just a gorgeous film with gorgeous people in it. The Aston Martin's gorgeous, but I'll go Thunderball. I just think there's something about this. I love how it takes its time to explore its character. It's like we're going back down to the Bahamas. We're going to the beach. Everything looks amazing. You know, we're going to the. He goes dancing with Domino. She's always wearing black and white. I don't know. Like, I think he looks outstanding in his suits. That's just, I think, Thunderball, but that's a hard one to choose. But just don't say this out loud. But I've always had a bit of a soft spot for Diamonds Forever as well.
Fair.
I'll go Thunderball. But I love Goldfinger. I like Dr. No. The only one I don't like is just I don't not like it. It's just dull. It's just You Only Live Twice, which I imagine was going to be your counter-programming choice.
I remember I did like that when I first watched it. I wouldn't say it's my favorite.
Maybe that'll do something.
We'll see. I think my answer would be From Russia with Love. I definitely want to rewatch quite a few of these. I remember I really liked Dr. No. Thunderball I've definitely warmed up to a bit over this podcast. But From Russia with Love, I would say
brilliant choice.
From the first few are definitely my favorite. So with that, let's end this by going through rapid reviews, anything we've seen recently. I have quite a few random things to talk about here. As far as new releases go, I just want to mention there's 2 good filmmakers who've put out really excellent films recently. Steven Soderbergh, before we lost him to AI, before the AI took over. The Christophers is absolutely fantastic. Ian McKellen literally might be giving the performance of his career here. 2 people just like debating, yelling about art and the purpose of art and mentorship. And when you're late in life as an artist, what really matters to you. Found that to be really stunning. And then David Lowery, I almost missed this one, but he put out Mother Mary. And actually both of these star the same actress who's absolutely phenomenal in both. It's a very weird film. It feels like a play becomes very, very abstract look at art, at trauma, at love specifically. And you just like sit there, and I was absolutely captivated by this. I think it's some of Lowry's, and not that he has a perfect filmography, but I think this is some of his best work he's ever done. Like, I really was truly moved by this. And in the same way, where when I think about Mother, and I think, well, Mother Mary, that's funny, but I think about Mother. And if I read that as like this love for Mother Nature, I get like goosebumps and I could cry because I'm like, there's such a beautiful heart to this. When you look at Mother Mary, and specifically as a queer love story, like, or rather a queer story dealing with a former relationship, not necessarily that they fall in love. Some of the ideas here, just I could cry thinking about. It's really, really beautiful. Outside of that, watched a lot of Cannes films, which we don't need to get into today. But I wanted to also celebrate Cannes. I've been in a big Cannes mood by reading Roger Ebert's book, 2 weeks in the midday sun, a Cannes notebook. I don't know if this is better for people who've been to a film festival or those who haven't been to a film festival. The book is not perfect. He really quickly loses interest writing about the Cannes Film Festival, which is rough for a film about the Cannes Film Festival. But how this captures like and I've never been to Cannes, to be clear, but how this captures like the ritual of being at a film festival, especially when you've been to year after year, it just made me like want to be at a film festival, to be honest. Like, I love at times, not that all the films are great, but the little like moments in between films and the little sense of community and the little sense of like wonder that you get in as you just go to film festivals. I think it's really magical, and I thought this book captured it really well. And then finally, Jack, kind of your fault, this one. I'm not going to go too in depth, but I have not caught up fully. I've watched the first 3 episodes of season 3 of Euphoria. It's an interesting show. I'm excited to talk about it. I don't think I'm as negative as you are overall. Definitely some weird projections of getting specifically actresses to do visually certain choices that I find shocking and baffling, especially with like where they are in their careers. I think there's something here building, and obviously, partway through the show, we'll see how it ends. I think when it looks at redemption, really like what do you put your faith into? Do you put your faith in God? Do you put your faith in money? Do you put your faith in sex? There's something here brewing, which tends to be this guy's like MO, right? He creates these works that has something brewing. Sometimes he hits it, right? Like with Assassination Nation, sometimes he sticks the landing. Sadly, more often than not, he doesn't hit the ending. So like, or land the plane or whatever you want to say. So like, we will see where this goes, but I'm certainly intrigued. And yeah, I guess that's my Euphoria catch up. Jack, what have you seen recently?
I haven't seen episode 3 of Euphoria. I'm glad we're on the same page, because next time we have a chat, there's going to be an interesting one, because I feel the same way to you. Like, one big indicator of how that show's going, we mentioned this off air, but I think it's important to mention it now, is that like on Monday morning when I get up for work, when I'm on my break, let's say about 9:30 in the morning, I'll go on Twitter just to see what's happening, like for like 10 seconds and barely like a minute, and it's just supercuts, edits of been like stills or like 2-minute, 3-minute clips from the episode before, and it's constantly Sydney Sweeney being provocative, and that's it. And there's no like conversation happening now with it. There's no conversation about masculinity, because or how dynamics at school are different to adult life, or vice versa, and drugs and sexualization or queerness, or just about gender, and how those dynamics, which are quite profound to talk as an adult, how they're spoken like as when you're kids. That's an interesting parallel to have, an interesting boiling pot. That's gone now, and because those characters don't interact anymore, and they're all on their individual journeys. What can you get out of Rue being a drug mule, aside from it being fun? Because there's nothing there, is there? There's I suppose there's a bitter irony that she's trying to stay sober in a world that's constantly trying to fuck her up. And that you look at Sydney Sweeney's character that wants to be rich and famous, and the world that is there for her, the easy, accessible ways to exploit herself and then be exploited by other people around her. They're interesting conversations, like her having to do that to pay for flowers for a wedding should be an indictment of the society that she's in, but also an indictment of like capitalism to begin with. there are no conversations about that. And perhaps they might be on Ebert's site or Hollywood Reporter, but you just don't see them in the consciousness anymore. You don't see them, you know, there's not a conversation about that because it's not meaningful anymore. The show's gone. It's become an anthology almost. So it's very disappointing to see where it's gone. I think it should have stayed 5 seasons throughout high school and just gone through that. But it is what it is. But I'll watch episode 3 just for the shits and giggles. But I think by the time I'll have spoke to you again, I think we'll probably be on episode 4 or 5 at that point. So we'll start to see at least something shaping up. But at the moment, it's just provocative voyeurism that seems to be one person who gets off on it.
Typically, we're both on the Euphoria train. Neither of us are dropping out of the season.
Oh no, I will watch it all. Yeah, I mean, I watched like half the Penguin. I was like, I can't do this anymore. And then other stuff I've been like, I wanted to watch the Jackal with Eddie Redmayne.
Oh yeah,
and I haven't got around to that yet. So I'll probably get a bit more into the TV just because it's more accessible where I'm working at the moment. But I don't know what's going on here. I don't see the overall narrative. I don't see where this is leading up. I don't see an overall arc. I see individual stories that are not leading anywhere, that are pandering, and I just see exploitation for the sake of like sexual voyeurism because that's the world these people live in. Like that's all well and good, but you know, like if you look at the reality of OnlyFans, like there's a lot of like single mothers who have to do it to survive, or like a lot of kids. When I say kids, I mean like 18-year-olds who have to do it to like because they've got nothing else. I think that's like I think for statistically the way that stripping is introduced is young girls who've got no other option. You know, I think that's an interesting conversation to have about why that is the lifeline, the accessibility of that, and why is that the lifeline? You know, that should be an indication, an indictment of society in general, but also that there should be an element of freedom there as well. So it's an interesting conversation to have, and I think sex work's real work. Don't get me wrong; I'm not suggesting anything otherwise. But there should be a conversation why sex work feels like it's like it's the forefront of something rather than like charity or something. You know, like it's an individual thing. It's like being self-employed. You're your own boss. It's ultimately, you know, get out there. But if it is very much the American dream, it's that you take ownership of who you are, what you are, and you earn money about yourself. The connotations of that are interesting in society, but we'll probably have it. I'll tell you what would be interesting, Carson, if you're up for that. It'd be interesting to do individual stuff, and then me and you sit down for an hour one weekend, and we just talk about season 3 because I feel like
that's the plan. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure we'll catch up on rapid reviews, but we're doing. I mean, according to me, we were doing a full episode, so yeah, I would love to.
No, I think we should do it because I think that I don't know where this will land, and I will sit here now. And I'll shave my head to the fucking an inch of its life if this guy has any way he's going to land this, because to me I see it's like flaring in every possible direction.
I love that you're saying that, not even having seen episode 3, which I don't think will change your opinion on this, but probably worsen it quite a bit. But we'll see.
I'll get to the films anyway. This is going to be a bit of a strange one here, and I'm out of sync a little bit, so bear with me. I watched Hell Up in Harlem, which is a sequel to Black Caesar. I didn't know that. And when this film started, I was like, this is the ending to Black Caesar. This doesn't make any sense. But a lot of these films reuse and repurpose a lot of scenes and stuff like that. So, but like, no, it's a sequel. It's okay. It's made on the fly. I thought it was like, it had a fun finale, if I remember right. Like, I'm trying to remember the ending to it, which I think is like this big explosion. No, that's a Shaft. Sorry, that's a mistake. The Shaft sequel's really good. I forgot to mention that. But Hell Up Harlem was like okay, but the first film's like you're watching absolute bastard, and then it tries to humanize him, and then this one it does the exact same thing, and it just can't get over it. It's a very difficult film to like. Okay though, I did watch Spike Lee's Highest to Lowest. I hadn't seen the Akira Kurosawa film, so I have to be careful how I say this. I thought this was a tonally very interesting film. I say interesting lightly because I think it's all over the place. But granted, due to the narrative, I think it has to be. There's a few twists and turns here, which I think are quite inventive. And there's an interesting conversation about capitalism, about greed. I don't think it sticks the landing. I'd be interesting to have watched the Kurosawa film, which I feel like would be darker. But this feels like it's a very much sprightly, uplifting finale when you compare it towards the whole of the film. Very interesting. I don't think it really wants to talk about the societal. I mean, it mentions it, but it'd be very interesting to see the societal connotations of him in his position. Like he's Robin Hood at one point, then he's bastardized. I think it would have been interesting to sort of absorb that social commentary a little bit more, because Spike Lee's usually really, really quite keen on that. But nevertheless, I thought that was interesting. I did quite like it. I did watch Death Watch, which is directed by MJ Bassett. Oh, a film that I think doesn't stick the landing, and I think it almost gets it. Like it's just like this very dark, dreary feature that if you watched at 1 a.m. on like a film channel and you couldn't sleep, it sort of works because it's very dreary, very tiring to sit through, purposely so. But I just think it doesn't substantiate its own weight. If anyone's seen it, it's like when you get to like the twists and turns in it and like the secrets and stuff, it's just like, oh, you had no idea where you were going to go with this. You've done that. Like, oh, okay. Again, it is fine. Like it's a decent 3-star horror movie in the trenches of World War One, but it was not underwhelming, but it was like, oh, okay. You get to a point. It's like, oh, okay. I haven't seen this, all of it. I've had to break this down because it's a mammoth to watch. I've tried to watch a little bit of Kinds of Kindness. I got through 2 of the stories, and I was like, oh, I'm going to have to just come back to this. So I can't give a review of it. Interesting, unnerving, sort of like brilliant Yorgos, where it's like reality is like very vague in it. It feels like if you had to remember reality through a dream, if that makes sense. Like it's like it doesn't quite make sense. It's like very unnerving to watch, but it was fun. I'm looking forward to seeing a bit more of it. I think
the third one is my favorite one, by the way. So,
well, I've got to the point where he's a cop. Jesse Plemons is a cop. I don't know if that's the second or third one. And his wife's missing, apparently, or something. So I'm looking forward to that. And then, what else have I been watching? I think that's it. I've been really poor with it. I'm sorry, I've been really bad. But that's about it. But I'm just engulfed in euphoria. But I did watch Shaft's the sequel to Shaft, which is Shaft's Big Score. Outstanding. Oh, outstanding! The set pieces in the end to that, terrific. How did they get away with stuff like that in 1972? There's like a boat chase, big chase on the docks. I think the narrative in itself is a little bit like, I've seen this before, a bit of a revenge take on it. But I thought for the set pieces for 1972 were explosive, really good film. So not a great deal, but that's it. But thanks very much for having me. You know I love this anyway. To talk about James Bond and just to go all around the houses has been terrific. So thank you very much for having me. And our euphoria
right.
for James Bond has been excellent. But thank you much for inviting me, Cass. And the program has been excellent again. And it's going to be an interesting few weeks here on Mums, because I can see this is going to go some strange places, and there's some ups and downs here. So I'd be interested to know your opinions on stuff. So yeah, thank you very much for having me on. I really enjoyed this.
No, thank you. And that's a good way to put it. Ups and downs for sure. I'll shout out quickly. We just released our Best Picture Rewind episode. Myself and Jakob Flash looked at the best years of our lives. I will just say, I know everyone at home is like, I have no idea what that film is. I don't care. Listen to this podcast. Watch the movie. It was a very, very powerful podcast. Jakob broke down in tears at a certain point.
No way.
Got some tears. It's a great film. I mean, I'll say it's an excellent film, but a very, very, I think, important conversation about a film that has sadly been lost to time. So would highly recommend that. Jak, on a maybe less poignant note, we talked about The Force Awakens, as well as just really talking about the state of Star Wars.
I
So
broke
definitely check
down in
that
anger.
out. Right. Tears for different reasons, but
Yeah,
still.
bless her.
Coming out soon, next month, we have our Best Picture Rewind episode on All About Eve. We will be talking about Disclosure Day. We'll be talking about Lawrence Anyways for Patreon, and obviously on Her Majesty's Secret Service. I also mentioned on our Patreon, I teamed up with Jakob and we found the audio files. I don't know if anyone remembers, but back in like 2021, we had an old Patreon and we made exclusive episodes for it called Classic ClapperCast at the time. And we are releasing all those on our Patreon as content. So I'm very excited that some of those can be out there. Just a little teaser. One of them opens up with a 10-minute segment of myself, Jakob, and Nick eating a full apple pie in honor of a ghost story.
Yeah.
It's audio only, so it is 10 minutes of like laughing slash
ASMR.
just ASMR. It's very ASMR. But I apparently we decided it should open the episode. So the rest of the episode we're just sitting there kind of dying. But I think it's a very fun work that we did. So you can check that out on our Patreon. Over at Clapper, obviously, great releases. I'm covering a lot of the Cannes Film Festival over there. Some great stuff. It's been a really solid year. I like that everyone who went to Cannes, and this is how it's been for a couple years now, all these big releases, people fly thousands and thousands of dollars to Cannes, and they're like, these all suck. Meanwhile, you check out some of the smaller films, the ones that you get access to, ones that might be overlooked. And I'm talking about like 5-star content in some of them. So I would highly recommend you check out some of those reviews.
It's been very anti-American this year as well.
Yes, which has been interesting to see.
Yes.
We also have reviews, obviously, from like the Berlin Film Festival, as well as just random reviews here and there. So I think that's all we have to talk about today. Thank you so much for joining, Jak, to kick off our Hot Bond Summer. And we will see everyone next time. Well, actually, first, Jak, online, where can we find your work online?
Oh, you can find me on Letterboxd and at Clapper, the username at Jak-Luke Sharp. I'm on with Carson as much as I can on Saturdays because he's very generous. He changes the schedule because he's lovely, and that's how generous you are as a person. So thank you very much for joining. Because you don't have to do that. You could be Sunday nights, but that would kill me.
No, and you're so welcome. That I value so much. I even added a full Euphoria episode. Like, you're welcome. I wanted the record to show that was for Jak. Jak is the reason.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to not worm my way out of that when that day comes, because that might be really difficult for us. I don't know where this is going, but you're always really gracious to move it on Saturdays. I'm hoping to get in a few podcasts with Jakob and Randy as well. But it's just timings that are terrible because they've got a lot of stuff going on, bless them. But yeah, and then I've got a few stuff with Nick, and then just some reviews down the line. But we were speaking off air, like the schedule for me with cinema releases. It's just I'm not compelled. We've been having this chat for a while, haven't we, behind closed doors, and it's the releases at the moment. It's just it's I think mainstream now it's subpar, and I think, like you said, the most stuff I find now is independent work is exceptional. I think the last few pieces from Cannes I've reviewed the last few years have been excellent as well, and I think that's the stuff that people need to go to and enjoy. I think go watch Spider-Man Brand New Day. I think that's all well and good, but also go out there to support something a little bit lower down in the trades as well. Just go watch something a bit, not experiment, but just go out there and watch something that you probably won't go watch and have a little bit of fun with it. And we shit on a lot of Prime releases and a lot of Apple TV and Netflix, but there's some good stuff out there as well. So definitely enjoy yourself and a lot of stuff, So I'm looking forward to that. But at the moment, I think mainstream stuff. Me and you both about this chat. I think it's very subpar. It's probably.
We could schedule on here every single week. We go to the theater and discuss something new. I don't know if anyone's noticed. We haven't really done that recently, and there's reasons behind it. Yeah.
I think yeah. We just seem to reiterate certain problems with it, and I think at this point now, people sort of need to get the impression that that's because of a reason, and I think a lot of stuff's subpar. I hope Disclosure Day does well. I think that's. I hope we said that. I hope it kickstarts something, and we get. But I'm not. Me and you are not the people who look forward to the Marvel release. If it's not Eternals 2, I'm not there, and I think that. I think that's where I stand on it, but I'm definitely interested in watching some new stuff coming out soon. But it'll be interesting to see how Star Wars does, and I think that'll be the moment where the summer will be telling, I suppose. But after that, I'm not too sure, but we'll see what happens with the summer releases. But we'll have some fun. But your program has been excellent anyway, and it's been really nice and fun to go back to look at other stuff. I mean, your best picture stuff's been really good. I mean, I would never watch that Ziegfeld stuff.
Yeah, that was a mistake, but
No, I don't think it was. It's a cultural landmark. It was massive at the.
that's true.
I mean, I sort of rejected saying that then, but but I think it's a cultural landmark that again, no one's talking about that. Doesn't mean that it shouldn't be spoken about. I think it's an interesting thing that we've looked at, and I think we're really good at looking at older stuff. I like looking at older stuff with you anyway. It's good to chat about it. We've got a lot of years behind us and two different types of lives. I think it's interesting to look at stuff like that and corroborate and stuff. But again, thank you very much for having me on.
Well, and the goal of this is like, however many people are here, it's a bunch of friends just like meeting up to chat about cinema, right? Like older stuff, whether it's good or bad, it's
I
worthwhile.
can't talk about Grogu. I can't do it. It actually makes me sick saying that name out loud. Like, I'm not going to Galaxy's Edge. I'm not interested in anything else. And I don't see what I can get out of that with you.
How are you not going to Galaxy's Edge? Did you not see they just reset the timeline in it? So now Han Solo's there, and they just made that big announcement that they're resetting the timeline or whatever. Come on.
They need to reset a lot of other things in the timeline. I think they need to reset the timeline from 2015 if they can do it. But again, it's like, I don't know what me and you get out of that now. I on a personal note, I don't know about you. I don't want to speak for you, but I can't talk about that film. What can mean? I mean,
I don't know what I would say about it. I don't.
I think just those days are gone now. I don't think it has any cultural. I mean, also as well, I think time is really good on this podcast because I'm quite slow to things for a reason now. I like it to take a little bit of gravity. I like it to take a little bit of time to grow. I think looking back at something after a few years or a couple of months is good for it. I think going into something straight away is a bit dangerous, but that film will do nothing for me, and I think it's just a cash cow. I mean, I'm not interested whatsoever, but I'll be there if you want to go watch it. If it's worth it to talk to you about it. But other than that,
it was not on the schedule to begin with, so
I
don't think we need to add it. If you really feel the need, I guess we.
I think that's gone now. I don't think
I wasn't scheduling it because I was worried no one would talk to me about it. I didn't really want to talk about it.
I can't imagine what's going to be in that film. Like, if you look back at like Solo, what could we have actually spoke about except for Darth Maul in that film?
We did a Solo.
No, I know, but like,
and
I often think about that, and I think, what could we have actually spoke about that film? I don't know. It doesn't do anything for me. But
it's also like
speaking about that.
To be clear, and I think obviously if you listen this far, you know this, but it's not like we are falling out of love with like cinema as a medium, or like we don't see films. Like when we find films, we have passion about films. We have passion about filmmakers. It is like this hyper like specific modern mainstream cinema that is just like, it feels like it will kill you if you give it too much time or you give it too much energy. Like I want to be clear, like, it's not us being like, oh my gosh, we just hate movies now, and actually this is not something we care about. It's like just not good.
Yeah, I think it's torturous. So it's like FOMO. I don't want to put myself in a position to do that as well. Like, I've been excited. The last few years I've been excited to watch a lot of stuff, don't get me wrong, but I'm not going to bankrupt myself to go to like Cannes or Berlin ever again. Like I can't do that sort of stuff. I mean, I enjoy Venice because it's gorgeous and stuff, but I'm not going to Germany and get frozen to death in February to go on a train and get like the police to like get the guns out and stuff like that. I'm not doing that.
What do you mean? Nick loves it. You could go.
Yeah, but he's a different breed, Nick. Like I don't know how. He wants to live there, and to me, like Berlin is like it's like London and New York compared. It's ultra clean. It's ultra sanitized, yet in the same breath, it's like so out there as well. Like it's a perfect place to get a happy medium. But not to shit on Nick because he's not here, but he should have been because we were talking about the Italian. He's never on here when I want to talk as well. He's never ever joins us. I'm getting the impression that if it's not on Nick's time, Nick ain't interested. Where I go on Carson's time because I care for Carson and I want to be there with my friend, and that's all I'll say about that. And if he's listening, it's all because of you. This is. My anger, my passive aggressiveness about Grogu. I need to take that Wonder Woman poster down. It's actually making me sick.
Yeah, that's crazy. That's like a bull putting a red flag in its pen. Like that's crazy.
Yeah. Well, it's either that or Midway, and I feel like two of those things have different connotations.
That's fair.
Maybe I'll have to buy another one. But again, I'm
no.
I'm looking forward to the program. You always do a really good shout, and All About Eve sounds really good as well. Really good stuff. Really
Can't
good
wait.
stuff.
Hillary will be there. Love Hillary, so
Oh,
it'll be good.
Hillary's lovely.
Yeah. Love all of our cast. Our whole crew is great. One year,
Yeah.
I don't know who will make it. One year we need to do we will do a big either Venice or Cannes. Nick, Yakub, get the whole gang there. One big year,
I would love that. That'd be really good.
We'll
I don't think anyone would get a conversation.
No.
Anyway, we'll move on. Anyway, we'll have to end this here because we're romanticizing things now.
We'll sit there doing a podcast in Venice as the police helicopters swarm in and make it where we can't even hear you speak at all. So it's just like the worst audio ever put to podcast form. 1 year while you smoke a cigar and eat like loud chips during the podcast, 1 year that will be us. I must admit, editing that was it was a weird day, but outside of that,
I remember that. That's the day where I was meant to meet my wife at the beach, and she was like, "I'm not going. There's glass everywhere," and I was like, "Oh my god!" And Nick was like, "I know a really good burger place," and I was like, "Okay." He's like, "Yeah," and then he ate vegetarian meatballs cold, and next thing it made me feel fucking sick. My god, man! You've got. I would love to meet you there. I'd love to meet you there. It's so fucking crazy, that place. The Italians, they just don't give a shit. I love it. Like,
hey, 1 year I'll be there. I want
to. You ever get there? I'll buy the ticket. I'll go. I'll meet you there. I'll do it. I'll take time off work. It's such a crazy place. Berlin's overrated. Venice is like just crazy.
I don't think I could justify the trip for the Berlin Festival. But Venice 1 year. Venice 1 year, yeah.
Yeah, no, we'll do it right. All right, thank you very much for having me.
Yeah. No, thank you, and thank you everyone for listening and joining us on this odyssey of a journey, odyssey of a podcast. We will see you next time. Goodbye.